So a very warm good morning to all of you. Warm in the room and warm outside, barring a little rainstorm before. My name's David Rose. I'm the Director of LEX Training in Brussels, and I'll be your moderator for this session today on business collaborations to scale low-carbon energy solutions. I'd like to start off by giving my sincere apologies to all the people seated behind me here. I am thinking of you, even though I'm not looking at you, ladies and gentlemen. So, let's start off. Obviously, this session is co-organized, as you may have seen from the program, by three stakeholders: the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the WBSCD, Eurometaux, the European Non-Ferrous Metals Association, and Eurelectric, the Union of the Electricity Industry. Now, I think many of you, if you've been here in previous sessions at Sustainable Energy Week, or you haven't, you'll be familiar with one fact, which is the significance of 19%. Greenhouse gas emissions are down 19% between 2005 and 16. So there's a gap to the Paris Agreement. So clearly we need to accelerate decarbonisation if we're going to close that gap. The energy transition needs to be accelerated. And if the EU is going to meet its 2050 energy and climate goals and respect the Paris Agreement, that is essential. So the focus of this session is on collaboration across the different stakeholder groups to scale up low-carbon energy solutions. Now, I'd like to just give you a brief overview of where we're going with this session. So feel free to take a look at the slides on one of the screens here in the room as well. We have two aims for the session. The first one is discuss the role of collaboration across stakeholders, companies, civil society, academia, government, to scale up low-carbon energy solutions in line with the EU's long-term decarbonisation strategy that you're, I'm sure, all familiar with. And secondly, we want to have a deep dive through a panel also on sustainable industry electrification as one of the several forms of cross-sector collaboration that can take us towards these 2050 goals. Now, in terms of modality, we'll start off with a little brief framing introduction. I'll introduce our speakers in a moment. Well, then I'll be interviewing then two different stakeholder groups to look at best practice in developing an integrated energy strategy. We'll then move to the main part in one way of today in terms of time, which is our panel on looking at opportunities and barriers for cross-industry collaboration to scale up deployment of decarbonised electricity. And then I'll briefly interview our opening speaker just to get some closing reflections on our session. So to make best use of these 90 minutes that we have together, or 80 now as we stand, I would like to also make a request to all of you as an audience. We're going to rely on your input through a number of different questions to collect your views as we go along in this session, and also when we have a Q&A section of our panel, which we intend to give good time to. I'd ask you all please to do me a favour now and take your mobile devices if you can. Can you show me those please, ladies and gentlemen? Have we got them there? Hold them up, don't be shy, come on. Let me see. Let me see all those wonderful metals that can be recycled. Wonderful, good, 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 good. Right. If you're not already logged in, I would invite you, look on the slide, to go to slido.com, enter the code EUSEW19, choose the room Jenkins, which is of course the room we're in, and select polls. Because in just a moment, I will indeed be asking you to give your opinion via a poll. We'll start with you, the audience. So just take a moment to log in if you haven't. So if you are logged in, as you can see already, we're getting some answers. Our first question: are you already involved in any collaboration projects related to decarbonisation? Yes, no, we've got plans to do this, or no, but we'd be interested in doing so. Just take a moment to share your view on that for our speakers, please. I think for any of our institutional stakeholders here in the room, particularly one of our panelists, Peter from the Commission, I'd hope the answer is yes.
If I were logged in, it would be.
Wonderful. All right, I'll give you another 10 seconds just to do that one if you haven't already, and my apologies if you're facing technical challenges. Yep, I think our voting is more or less stabilized now. So let's take a look then. A large proportion, almost 2/3 of the room is saying yes. 15% of you no, but we'd be interested. Another 14, 15% on the no. And we have plans to do so in the future for a certain number of you as well. So please take note, speakers, that a large proportion of our people here in the room, 2/3 perhaps, are actually already involved in such projects. So thank you everybody for your votes there via Slido. We'll use a few more of those. So I'd like to move on now then, without further ado, to the first of our 3 stages today then. Setting the scene for this idea of business collaborations to scale low-carbon energy solutions, I'd like to give the floor to Maria Mendeluce, the Managing Director of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Please, Maria.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thanks a lot for organizing this event in collaboration between the different organizations. I think the event couldn't be more timely as countries are agreeing on this net zero emission goal for the European Commission, which is very much welcome. I have to say that from the business perspective and also I think from societal perspective, this is a little bit confusing because we thought that we had agreed to net zero already as part of the Paris Agreement. And coming back and again, making, all this effort, which I understand that from a political standpoint are important, but I think it's important that we communicate to the rest of the world that actually, this is just ratifying what had already been agreed and that there is certain policy coherence, that we are not just backing ourselves. Because the good thing about being in Europe is that at least we know where we're going, and it's not like in other countries where they change their mind quite after Paris. So I would, for those that work close to communications in the European Commission, I would really recommend that there is a good communication about it so that people understand that we're staying to what we had agreed already on Paris. To me, more important than the net zero, which I think is very important, and let's face it, many businesses are already also committing to net zero emissions by 2050, which is really good, but I think it is the climate action plans, and those are a little bit behind, as the European Commission had said, and I think we all need to rally so that those are quite ambitious when we present them in COP26. For business, you are, well, this is a very audience, but the message is quite clear. We need the stable regulatory frameworks to do business, and because business is going to invest for a long period of time. For example, I can give you an example. Volkswagen is going to invest 30 billion in electric vehicles in the next 5 years, 10 years. So a company like Volkswagen that is going to invest 30 billion need to have certain certitude that actually the countries are serious about decarbonization, because they're putting a lot of money behind. And so they are asking for some policy coherence, and that happens with all the sectors. No? So it's not welcome when every time that there is a change of political parties, we kind of remove what has done, for example, in Madrid, in terms of transport zones, and then we do something else, because then where do you leave business at when you're changing regulations so frequently? That's why it's important, the net zero, because it's a long-term signal, but backed by strong and consistent and coherent NDCs, climate action plans by countries and cities. But here we came to discuss about cross-value chain collaboration, and we think at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development this is going to be fundamental, because we're looking at transforming the energy sector, transport sector, industry, food sector. And for that, it's not even going to be a sector, it's a value chain that we need to transform. So let's take the example of cars. So if we want to have electric vehicles, we need to make sure that there's the vehicles, that the vehicle itself has low carbon materials, say steel, glass, etc., and that it can be charged in the different cities and different places with electricity, and that electricity is actually clean. Because if not, what are we doing if we're fueling cars with coal? So it's very important that business work together to develop these large investment plans that they are planning in different sectors. I said transport, hydrogen, also the food transformation is going to be enormous. But it's also very important that the policymakers as well work amongst themselves. So when countries are coming with new energy policies, it's straightforward that they need to look at the social dimension, innovation dimension, industrial development dimension together. And this is not easy because in companies, in governments, we often work in what is called silos, and we need to remove those and try to work across them. And well, there's not an easy recipe. I think both business and governments, I think we all agree that we need to break those silos and work together, and also work between the public sector and the private sector, because governments can leverage the important commitments that many companies are doing to be net zero by 2050, and use those commitments as a lever for other companies and other sectors to decarbonize at that speed. So I think we're going to hear more about this, and I will reflect back after the meeting, but I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I take away 4 main points from what we just heard from you then. So you're calling for greater communication, particularly by the Commission and by the European policymakers in terms of ambition, that the climate action plans at a national level really have to be properly done and well implemented. Also, thirdly, that business requires that framework, that safe framework in a sense, reasonably safe for the sorts of scale of investment you gave with the example of Volkswagen. And also, you mentioned the need for cross-sectoral value chain collaboration rather than just cross-sectoral collaboration as being a means of driving decarbonisation. Thank you very much. Right, well, let's move on then, building on Maria's comments and the framing she's given us for this session, to the second of our 3 stages that we're going to do today. Looking at best practice in developing an integrated energy strategy. And to do this, I'd like to actually pose a series of quick questions to the speakers on both my left and right, or right and left if you're behind me, which is indeed Sam van der Broek here on my right, is the VP for Decarbonise Yara at Yara. I'd like to note myself here as an external observer. It's interesting to see a job title of VP for Decarbonisation in a large company these days. And also on my left here is Maria Heinrich, the Manager of Climate and Energy at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So let's get moving then. I'll kick off, Mariana, with a question to you. We heard from Maria the need for this not just cross-sectoral, but cross-value chain collaboration. And obviously, what we're talking about here then is trying to bring in a truly integrated way of dealing with energy, an integrated energy strategy. I think many of us in the room have heard this term integrated energy strategy before, but actually, from your perspective, what is it?
Yeah, let's start with that. I think you're right. A lot of people talk about energy strategies, or we talk about cross-value collaborations. But the question is, what does that actually mean for companies, and how can they develop such a strategy? So if we start with the what, then we've seen a lot of companies over the last few years thinking about how can they purchase renewable electricity, because that's the sort of the first thing that companies have moved on. Now, I think what we're saying is that you need to take a strategic approach to your entire energy sourcing and to your energy management. And that is to keep a competitive advantage, in terms of the cost of your energy, but also in terms of the impact of the climate change on your company. And so when we at WBCSD talk about this phrase, really what we mean is, how do you achieve the energy-related financial and environmental objectives of your company? And what have you defined those to be? And so that is also particularly taking a new look at the roles and responsibilities that you have as a company today. Because with the energy transition, just being a passive energy user who has a procurement department who goes out there and buys electricity at the cheapest price possible, or buys actually any type of commodity at the cheapest price, or any technology at the cheapest price possible, is not what we're doing any longer. We're looking at a lot of other factors that also particularly include social and environmental aspects of what you're purchasing. And so we need to have a mindset change about how we're doing that. And the integration that you're pointing towards here, so I always think of this in terms of three parts of integration. So the first one is, don't look at a company's operations only, but look at the way how you interact with your value chain. Secondly, integrate the different departments within your business. So that could be from sustainability to strategic sourcing, engineering and manufacturing, finance, and strategy itself. And then thirdly, integrate the way that you're buying your power, your cooling, your heating, and your transport, because all have energy users in it. And as we're seeing a lot of electrification happening, those will naturally offer you better opportunities if you look at them in a holistic point of view. And I think, the poster child that I always think of here is IKEA. They obviously are a company that is not heavy industry, but they've done that example really well in terms of thinking, working with their supply chain, working with their customers. And I don't know how many of you. I know that they just started offering solar panels in the IKEA stores here in Belgium. Has anyone been to an IKEA store already and looked at them? Maybe purchased one?
Please note that we're selling this information to IKEA post-session, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, Mariana.
Wonderful.
Thanks very much. So I pick up then your integration 3 ways here. So moving from thinking about company operations in terms of mindset to the whole value chain, integrating departments and integrating procurement. Okay. So Sam, I want to bring in Yara's perspective now then. We've heard this ideal case study in a sense of IKEA. Let's transform that now over to the company that you represent as VP for Decarbonisation, and Yara. How has, also linking with what we heard from Mariana, how has Yara approached this idea of implementing an integrated energy strategy?
Well, David, just for the ones that don't know Yara, we are a world-leading crop nutrition company producing fertilizer and environmental products. And at Yara, all started basically with the launch of our new mission and vision about 3 years ago, where we have the mission to responsibly feed the world and protect the planet, and have a vision of a world without hunger, collaborative society, and a planet respected. So, and in light of that new mission and vision, we also decided that we should not only focus on the emissions related to our own operations, but we should really look at the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, meaning also at the upstream supply chain, raw material and energy, and at the downstream use of our products in the farmer fields. So we started basically a process of data collection, data management, also reporting, so not only mandatory but voluntary reporting under schemes as CDP, for example. And then definitely we realized that the energy strategy for us is of key importance, because we are the biggest private or industrial natural gas consumer in Europe. So that means that effectively decarbonization will need to have a strong element of deep electrification based on renewable energy as well. So that were all good initiatives started, and then to take it one step further into implementation, the company also decided as a final point to create a business unit, Decarbonize, which I'm proudly heading since 3 months now. And that unit really has been built up to harmonize the carbon reduction approach across the value chain and across the company, but also to have bottom line focus, because in the end we need and we will create also business opportunities out of that. And then finally we will also come with new aspirations and targets 2050, 2025 at our Capital Markets Day, which is actually next week.
Thanks, Sam. Congratulations on the new role then, 3 months in. Good stuff. Okay, so it's clear to me then, I double underline what you mentioned about scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, both up and down the actual streams, if you like, across the value chain. But I'll come back to you, Mariana. I think we saw from our poll, there are people here in the room that have initiatives on decarbonisation. There are people that are interested in deepening those initiatives. Now, I know that your organisation, WBSCD, has just recently published your guidelines, if you like, for trying to implement an integrated energy strategy. Can you give us a little bit of a touch, a feel of from your vision, how do you go about that? So those that are doing it can benchmark, and those that would like to have some sort of roadmap to think about.
Yeah, I think what we're often finding talking to business is that a lot of companies understand that they need to do something and they want to do something, but they don't always know what. And so, and that's, you know, a difficult sphere to manage. And so what we've tried to do with those guidelines that we're publishing is not to tell companies what to do, because each individual business is different and you cannot determine what works for one person might not work for the other. But what we can do is give you a blueprint of how do you run through the process in your own company, and what are the best practices and the top tips and the things to avoid, maybe that can help your company and yourself as a person responsible for developing integrated energy strategy to do that. And so we thought about 6 different steps for us. It comes to actually starting with what Sam just mentioned about the vision, right? You said that vision 3 years ago, and that's probably since then influenced a lot of the decisions that have been taken at Yara. So starting with the vision and clear targets is really important. Then you should have a really clear governance for that, and particularly senior management buy-in, CEO buy-in, that makes that strategy have the necessary funding and political support internally. Then you need data, and Sam already mentioned data as a really important thing. Then it's also about reporting, and so I'm not only thinking about mandatory external reporting, but also voluntary reporting and also internal, because we found that employees are a massive contribution to implementing and developing that strategy. And so if you empower them by giving them data that they can use and they're engaged in the way that they can work, then that's really brings a lot of advantages. And then lastly, it comes to what is it actually that you're doing. So do you move from energy efficiency to renewable electricity? Do you then look into heating options, cooling options, maybe solar cooling, and how do you deal with your transport, either the goods or the people that you might be transporting for your business?
Okay, thanks, Mariana. So you're talking then about guiding instead of telling, in a sense, and then moving from vision and targets through to really selecting the outcomes you want in different parts of your full value chain. We'll pick up later in a few minutes about this idea you mentioned, though, of getting buy-in from senior management, CEO and board. I see a potential barrier there in some organizations, that there may be a strong intention to do so, but of course you have to make the business case for this. Exactly. It's my experience of board meetings. I'm seeing a few nods in the room as well. We'll come back to that. So Sam, I'll move on. I want to dig a bit deeper into Yara here. So you mentioned 3 years ago you started this. 3 months ago you took over this specific role across the company to coordinate and drive that. But why did you mentioned wider societal benefits of your approach, but why did Yara actually decide to do this? What were your primary drivers of making this big decision 3 years ago to move in this direction? A little bit, I might add, ahead of the curve.
In a way, our CEO and our CEO and the whole company is very committed to the SDGs, and we also see the effects of climate change because we work with farmers around the globe every day, every month. So we hear and see a lot of stories around the effects and the devastating effects of climate change. And then also we realize that hydrogen, which is a key intermediate in our process, is at the heart of the energy transition. And for that sake, ammonia could be a very good carrier as well. And responsible fertilizer production and use is at the heart of an agricultural transition towards more efficient agriculture. So these have been really the drivers while we look at society, but also at opportunities for the business in the future.
And if I can ask Sam, clearly, as Mariana mentioned, you've got to have this, if you like, sort of values in place, and also the case you put to your own management within the company. What were the expected outcomes when you started this journey, and what benefits have you seen so far?
So I think one of the expected outcomes and what we really wanted to achieve was internal and external engagement, basically. So internally, just to give you an example, a few weeks ago, I was visiting one of our production plants with an executive. And the security guard at the gate, he proudly, just before saying anything else, he gave us a newspaper article on a new technology that he thought could be used to decarbonize that particular production site. So that was for me a good sign that we were on the right track. And then externally, of course, we got engaged, for example, with food chain companies in striving to bring the first zero carbon milk on the market. With energy companies, with Engie, we have a collaboration and a feasibility study basically to produce green hydrogen, ammonia and fertilizer at one of our facilities in Western Australia. And then another unexpected one was, for example, in the supply chain. So basically, in the south of Norway, we have 40,000 truck drives a year to transport containers from the production site to the container harbor. And we set up a project with Kongsberg and an external partner, basically to have or to create the first zero-emission autonomous ship to transport these containers basically automatically and without emission. And that project should go, if all goes well, live end of next year. Also on that same token, we realized that ammonia, a key product for us, is also an excellent hydrogen carrier, probably even better than hydrogen itself over longer distances. So we're involved now in quite some horizon projects as well to look into ammonia as a zero emission shipping fuel, for example, as a potential new business.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Some interesting little examples there of the benefits that you've got from the security guard right through to your entire transport approach. So it's really across the value chain, I think, in a sense. Right, Mariana, coming back to you. So we've heard from you these 6 points about how you can approach implementing an energy strategy. We've heard from Sam with Yara's experience of some of how they did that and some of the benefits they've gained already. But if anyone in the room that's already on a similar journey as Sam's describing for Yara, or is planning such a thing, this transition from a more within the company to a more full value chain approach, what does a journey look like? I mean, to put it into cold, hard terms, what are the practical sorts of steps that people need or you suggest people should take?
Yeah. So I think the journey actually that many companies are taking today, if you would be starting today, is probably slightly different than what some of the pioneers have done 5 years ago. Because the usual start was with energy efficiency, and that's a pure cost measure that business have been working on for 20 years. There's nothing new about implementing energy efficiency. What was new for those was those who were the first ones buying renewable electricity for their businesses or committing to become 100% renewable business. But I think if we're looking at now, particularly for companies who are wanting to take a more integrated and strategic approach to this, then you actually have to start with your risk exposure. And you have to analyze, what does it mean for your company to have energy-related risks or climate-related risks, and where do you find them? And not just in your own operations, but also anywhere in your supply chain or with your customers. Then, ideally, I tell you, look through our steps and do an integrated energy strategy. That would be perfect. And then you set your targets, and then you implement them. And then you also need to look at what is the relationship with the SDGs here, because we have a lot of SDGs that are affected and can be positively as well as negatively affected by a business. And Sam was mentioning that now, how the SDGs are really important for Yara. So as we are seeing those companies now starting with the risk assessment, we see that's probably the right way to go about it.
Okay, if I can draw you all to the screens, ladies and gentlemen, this is something I found in WBSCD's guidelines when I was doing a little bit of reading in relation to today's session. Take a quick look. This is a visual version, I think, a little bit related, and it caught my attention. The goal got me first. Okay, integrated energy strategy. I can see the benefits in that from lots of perspectives. But how does that relate to what you've just shown us, going from risk through to implementation and more?
Yeah. So what what we try to show here is that there's different. Of course, every company's journey will be individual because there's no one way of how how it's going to work. But we think there's certain steps that companies are taking on the way, and so you move from the bottom left-hand corner to the top right-hand corner. And the axes are showing two elements. So on the bottom axis, we have the integration element. So how you first usually start with just looking at your own operations, then you move to engaging with your energy suppliers and your technology providers, and then you move to full engagement with your supply chain as well as your customers. And going up, we have different targets that companies are usually setting. So it comes to energy efficiency, then low carbon energy sourcing, so that could be renewable heat or renewable electricity, and then to science-based climate and energy targets. So there we're then talking about, that could be science-based targets in the Science-Based Target Initiative, or other validated targets. But then we're really talking about scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And I think we purposefully didn't left the middle space wide because, companies will be finding themselves at a different starting point. And then also some companies will slowly, in their company culture, they will slowly decide that moving from one step at a time throughout the journey is the right way for them to do it. And other companies might be deciding that they just want to jump and they start with a really ambitious approach and they implement it all within 3 or 4 years. And that really comes down to company strategy and company culture.
Okay, and Sam, just as a reflection, where's Yara on this particular graphic?
I think on the engagement side, as I explained, we at least have multiplied our efforts with the customers and the value chain significantly over the last few years. When it comes to target setting, so energy efficiency, definitely yes. We also have a good historic track record. I believe we have reduced our emissions based on 1990 levels already by more than 55%. On energy sourcing, etc., definitely we are really in the process on looking on how to at least partially transform from gas to renewable electricity and to set targets, demonstration projects, etc. around that. And then on the top part, I think you have the science-based targets, which is a process we feel that we are now ready to engage on, but that we are also checking with the sector, basically, to make sure that we have a sectoral pathway in the science-based targets. So that's definitely work in progress. We are not committed to that yet.
Okay, Sam, so to place you then, where are you? Bottom, middle, or end?
Yeah, I would hope on the x-axis we're quite far to the right. On the y-axis, probably more in the middle still.
Okay, well, good steps being taken. I'm sure you've got many more planned as well. Okay, all right. But I'll make a reflection now as the moderator. We've heard, a case I think many people will agree with for this value chain approach. We've heard about the value of collaboration across different stakeholders. We've heard good examples from Sam and Yara. We've heard about IKEA from Mariana, where these things are being done. Allow me to play the devil's advocate here for both of you. Yeah? What about barriers? Because from one perspective, this inspires me, but from another perspective, I'm thinking, okay, great, it sounds wonderful in theory, but what are the actual practical barriers that you hit when you try and do this, apart from the starting point of CEO buy-in? And Mariana, do you want to start with that? And then Sam, maybe we can also draw quickly on Yara's experience too.
Yeah, I think that is really the starting point because, having spoken to many of our members about this journey and hearing where they are, it's usually those ones where the CEO has a strong vision or the C-suite members of the company have a really strong vision of where they want to be. And those ones are usually the ones who are moving fast. And if you don't have that, you will probably move slower as a company. Then I think you mentioned the business case earlier, and cost is an issue, right? So don't get us wrong. We're not saying this is all rosy and it's all going to happen. Like even with renewable electricity, which is reliable and competitive and available in many, many countries across the world at prices that are cheaper than gas and coal at times, it is not the case everywhere. And so we're quite aware of that. So, but that's why, I think we need to push further and implement further so that we're driving down the cost curve for many of these solutions, and hence they become naturally the thing that companies want to choose. So not sustainability versus cost effectiveness, but they both lead you to the same solution. And then I think also, there's an element around companies can sometimes only move as fast as society and customer aspirations move. Because if you, say for example, nobody have ever wanted an iPhone, then like Apple wouldn't exist. It's also about knowing and understanding what customers want, and then supplying what they actually want to buy.
Okay, thanks. And Sam, from your perspective, barriers? What barriers have you faced so far, Yara, as a company? What might you see on the horizon?
Yeah, definitely there are barriers, and it's not all rosy, I would say. After all, like in our example, we're also a hard-to-abate global sector, basically. So going today from a grey to a green product basically means doubling or tripling the production cost. And if you know that is up to 80% of the final product price, that is of course an issue. So we definitely believe we can be part of and want to be part of the solution. But policy-wise, we need a policy framework. We need a more globally harmonized carbon policy and prices to make this happen. Just to give maybe a practical example as well. So green fertilizer, that would cost, let's say, double or triple. But if you translate that to the loaf of bread, that ends up at your kitchen table maybe every day, that would only be a 5 cents increase. So I think Mariana or David, we would all be happy to pay the extra 5 cents for a loaf of bread for the climate. And I think the same for the car industry, and I hope the colleagues in the metal industry agree, but I heard as well that the green metal, of course, is much more expensive, but when you would translate that into a car price, that would be something like €200 for a car extra. So I think these examples indicate that what we really ask to policymakers is as well to have a holistic view on these supply chains, because they tend to be quite long, and if everyone in the supply chain has no incentive or no way to participate, no benefit, it will be very difficult to pull in a way that the low carbon products through, right? Because the industry cannot carry this alone. So I think that's a major message from us industry also to policymakers. We are ready to move, but let's look holistically at the value chain. So that is a main barrier, I think, for us.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So I pick up there on cost. Mariana, you mentioned something our panel's going to pick up on as well, this need for competitive electricity. You mentioned cheap and readily available, which I think, as you noted, are two challenges that are not always in place. Two things we don't always have where we need it and when we need it in every place. Customer aspirations, you both noted, and also clearly from you, Sam, this need for a more joined-up, holistic policy approach. Right, let's bring this phase to a close then before we move on to our audience and then our panel. If there are 2 or 3 things that you want the audience to remember, Mariana, Sam, from your intervention today in this session, what are they? What's your 1, 2, 3?
Okay, so number 1 is coming back to the decarbonisation. Emissions need to be reduced now, and I think 2030, where we need to hit the first goals, is now in the business planning horizon of companies. So there is no, you need to act now, you can't wait. Number 2, I think it's around empowering employees, and I love that security guard example. That's exactly what we want. And number 3, I think it's for companies to think about which side do they want to be on. Do you want to use the energy transition as an opportunity for your business, or do you want to grapple with the constant changes and the risks from a passive point of view?
Okay, thanks. And Sam?
I would say, first of all, get started. Don't be afraid to engage with the value chain. That's really important. I'm also a big believer in the concept of serendipity. So if you're there, if you're taking action, business opportunities will follow in new ways than before, in a much more collaborative manner. And I would say, indeed, try to take a patient and thorough approach, while, of course, being impatient to implement the necessary climate actions. So you need to find that balance.
Okay, thanks very much, Sam. Perhaps, ladies and gentlemen, could we have a brief round of applause for Sam and Mariana for their time? Right, Slido time, ladies and gentlemen. Question for you. Have a look at the screen. Have you seen, from what you've heard so far, any opportunities to update your organization's existing energy strategy? Just building on our first question. And could I ask my technical colleagues to bring our poll up in real time, please? Thank you. I'd like to note, unlike the current discussions in the UK for who will lead the government into Brexit, we seem to have a clear winner here, which is on the yes side. So nearly half of you then are saying, yes, I'd like more information. Sorry, Maria, are you going to provide some more information? Where? How?
Yes. Sorry, more information.
Yes, the audience wants more information. Where are they going to get it from?
Well, join WBCSD, thank you.
Well,
No.
follow them on Twitter, find the hyperlink for the guidelines, have a look, ladies and gentlemen. I had a quick skim myself. They're a reasonably good read. I must recommend them. Okay, so yes for a third of you, no for a few, and still some undecided. If the no's would like to join me afterwards, we can discuss further. Okay. Right, with that thought in mind, then, let's move on then to the third of our three phases really today with this session to make best use of everybody's time. Let's move on to our panel. Now, we're going to be tackling then, we've already touched upon at the end of my little brief interview with Mariana and Sam, the idea of barriers. And one's jumped up, obviously, in terms of cost and supply of decarbonised electricity. Our panel's specifically going to focus in on opportunities and barriers. So a positive view, but also a realistic one, for cross-industry collaboration to scale up deployment of decarbonised electricity. Now, we talked before about stakeholder groups and the need for collaboration. Our panel's made up of 4 of the different stakeholder pillars. Let me briefly introduce in speaking order. We have Daniele Agostini, the co-chair of electrification and the energy efficiency working group at Eurelectric, and also head of energy and low carbon policies at Enel. We have Ronald Misterud, Vice President and Head of EU Affairs at Norsk Hydro, representing the non-ferrous metals sector. Peter Handley, Head of Unit Resource Efficiency and Raw Materials from DG GROW in the European Commission. And also representing civil society, we have Wendell Trio, the Director of CAN Europe. As many of you will know, an umbrella group of a very large number of environmental NGOs across Europe. So we're going to use our panel in 3 ways then. What we don't want to do is have long, extensive presentations from our speakers, ladies and gentlemen. We're more interested in also having a discussion and a dialogue on this issue. So with that in mind, we'll start off in a moment. I'll pose a quick question to each of our panelists to capture their views. A couple of minutes each. Then we'll go straight over to you as an audience with your questions. So be thinking about those questions straight away when you're listening to our speakers, and then we'll move on from there. I'll then ask our speakers to cap the session with a few brief closing comments of their own. So with that in mind then, I'd like to jump over straight away to the first of our 4 panelists. In order, that's Daniele Agostini from Eurelectric and Enel. So Daniele, Europe's power sector's obviously very ambitious. It's clear, it's well published in terms of decarbonisation before 2050, not by 2050. But where does collaboration with energy-intensive industries fit with your vision? And what are the main challenges that you think we need to overcome in the coming decades?
No, thank you, and thank you again for Eurelectric, the WBCSD, and the European Commission for hosting this event, and the first 2 for organizing it. we think collaboration is definitely key in this process. Is key because if you look at Paris, Paris has taught us three things in this respect. Ambition is key. We need to be more ambitious very quickly. Partnership. I think what has changed in Paris is that we've seen not only governments discuss, but we've seen a whole wide range of partners coming together and trying to understand and go through how this could happen. And the third part is transparency. We need to be more transparent of what we're all trying to do, on how we can do it, what are the opportunities and what are the challenges. So I think with this in mind, in the electricity sector in the last 4 or 5 years, we've been working very intensely on this. We already had a clear vision of how the electricity sector would decarbonize. But now the question is, we realize that the electricity sector can decarbonize more easily if it works in partnership with other sectors. And at the same time, it can help other sectors decarbonize. So there's some clear synergies there. And what I always say is like you need to look at the intersection between sectors, because that's where it's all happening. If you look at the iPhone that David, you were raising earlier, we had an acceleration when a phone became a navigator, became a picture-taking machine. There you go. And you forget all the other functions we're using, radio, stereo, and so on and so forth. Now it's a TV as well. So same thing with solar. Solar, we had acceleration in the PV sector when we started to build ICT in it. Cars and acceleration when you started to have rolling batteries, not just a mean of transportation, and soon is going to become a way of contributing to the electricity grid. So again, collaboration is key. To explore this in Eurelectric, we developed a study, and it's public, transparent, in a partnering type of way. We've developed a talking with the sectors, and we looked at different decarbonization scenarios, 80, 90, 95%. I guess the next step will be 100%. And we see in these scenarios that electricity can play a very key role in all of this, both directly by helping sectors decarbonize. We have an industrial sector that goes from 35% direct electrification today, and it can go up to 63% in a 95% decarbonization scenario. And this is just direct electrification. Now, if you look at indirect electrification, so actually powering the production of green molecule gases, we can even almost double that. So a great contribution, scenarios that were explored in partnership with other sectors, and that's why it's so important, discussing with other sectors, understanding that the production of ethylene can benefit of electricity. Electric arc furnaces in the steel sector are an important example of how electrification can happen. Now, to have this happen, we need investment, of course. It's an investment that needs to be spread out from here to 2050. We reckon in our study that you need around 90 to 110 billion euros a year overall investment on an economy-wide sector, so it needs to be well planned. And to actually mobilize in an efficient and effective way, we need both enabling conditions, and key actions, which is what you were asking. Now, the enabling conditions, first of all, it's clear ambition. And I think this week is an important week because at the Council we were discussing earlier, we're going to send a strong signal, hopefully, on European ambition. The other big important thing that we've learned in the last couple of years is citizen involvement. If we do not have that, we're going to have a problem. We need to make sure that citizens back this transformation deeply, intensely, and have a clear vision of what's going to happen. Third enabling condition is partnership, which is where we started from. Now, to achieve that, there's three main items and actions that we think we need to implement. First of all, we need to work on regulation. Regulation in the electricity sector, to make sure that flexibility provided by industrial players is rewarded, so that actually industrial players can get business opportunities out of the energy transition, not just cost. And the second item is infrastructure. Infrastructure needs to be developed. The market can work on technologies on the supply side, on the demand side. But if you do not have a platform of infrastructure that catalyzes the development of these technologies, you have a problem. Now, of course, we have in mind smarter and smarter and smarter grids. But when I talk about infrastructure, I'm also talking of infrastructure for research and development, for ICT, and for TLC. The infrastructure is what public policy needs to make sure that it is in place. Otherwise, we have examples like we see in Germany where a wonderful renewable energy is being produced offshore, but it doesn't actually get to the demand centers. Third but not last is the social dimension. Again, sustainable development, we all know, has three legs. It's environment, economy, and social. And I think somehow we managed to unlock the environment and the economy. Everybody's aware of the issues on this. We need to work on the social. Otherwise, it's like trying to accelerate while pulling your handbrake there. And so the social dimension needs to be built in there. And to do that, we need more integration, both across the value chain, across sectors, both in the private sector, but also in the public sector, where national governments often do not talk to local governments, or the Ministry of Environment is not talking to the Ministry of Transport, and so on. So those are the three recipes that I think we need to unlock partnership and accelerated decarbonization that we need. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Daniele. A few claps in the background there, I'll add one myself. So you're talking there then these enablers of being really clear ambition, transparency, and above all you double underline the social dimension of citizen involvement. So I think we're familiar with the infrastructural barriers. Technology is not infrastructure, they synergize if together. The regulation, clearly the framework needs to facilitate what we're trying to achieve. So do you see this social aspect, the buy-in of civil society, as almost taking, in some ways, that's the new focus we need, as well as those other elements you've mentioned?
Yeah, I think for many years we talked about green jobs. Now we're realizing that you cannot destroy brown jobs on one hand and then create green jobs somewhere else. In order to accelerate, you need to get those brown jobs converted into green. And we're doing that on our coal plants. For instance, in Civitavecchia and Brindisi, now the issues, what do you do with the supply chain? Can a private sector operator, not only on their own people, but also on the supply chain? That's difficult. That's where you need partnership with industry that can maybe re-employ that and other issues, but also with the local government, national government. So you really need a lot of this partnering to make sure that we move in an accelerated way.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Right, Ron Algar, I'll move on now to you. So a question for you. I mean, Europe's non-ferrous metal sector, I think as many of the room are familiar, is a large industrial consumer of electricity. That won't change. In fact, it will significantly increase by 2050. Demand is going to obviously go up very strongly. What do you see as the main opportunities for companies like the one you represent in Norsk Hydro to support the power sector evolution we've heard Daniele calling for? And what do you see as the challenges for your own uptake as a company of this decarbonised electricity?
Thank you. Thank you, Metoyer Electric and Commission, for setting up this interesting discussion. The net zero is a cross-industry project, definitely. Representing Hydro, a global aluminium company, and the non-ferrous sector, I want to mention three areas of opportunities and one barrier, one big barrier. On the opportunity side, I just first want to mention the contribution from the non-ferrous metal sector with metal for the renewable, the windmills and the solar panels and the grid and all kind of applications that goes into this transition. And in a wider, broader perspective, when it comes to solutions and products, I want to mention how we work in our company with designers and architects and researchers to develop products. Because, and it has been mentioned here, we have to, what we see in our company, we have to shape markets so that we drive demand in the right direction. IKEA has been mentioned. We have been collaborating with them on different products. We have, for example, a sofa which can be dismantled and you can use all the pieces again. So it's totally for reuse. It's not only for recycling, it's also for reuse. So it's to work all the way to shape these products. At the moment, we don't get extra paid for having the low carbon products, but that is what we believe will happen. Second, I just want to mention briefly that we have been energy intensive, electro intensive for decades. So we are extremely efficient already. And this is something that the sector that has to electrify now maybe can learn from. Because what we can contribute with in that context, in this situation where we are seeing a huge demand increase coming from the industry, we are extremely efficient already, and we also recycle more and more. And that in the recycling process, we only use 5% of the energy. Third, I will mention on cross-sector collaboration, the PPAs, the power purchase agreements. We have had long-term power purchase agreements with the electricity sector for decades, and we are now more and more entering into contracts with wind developers, because that is just a very nice common, we have common interests. We need long-term certainty for the power price, and the wind developer has a huge investment to get payback from. On the barrier side, I have to mention the carbon leakage mitigation effort that is so strongly needed. We buy electricity locally in Europe, and that is really where we want to produce as well, because Europe is developing with a greener and greener power base that is giving a lower carbon footprint for our products. The challenge is that this is also affected with extra EU cost, and we cannot pass on this cost in the global market where we are present. So fortunately, the Commission has acknowledged this and see the carbon leakage risk that we have, and the ongoing process of revision of the stated guidelines for compensation of indirect CO2 cost is the main barrier for us. It is in place. We need just to have it improved, because the CO2 price is increasing, and this is just giving us the biggest hurdle for future investments. And this is really important for all the elements that I was mentioning. It's to develop further in Europe, and it's to invest more in Europe, and it's to enter into the long-term contracts with the entering into these long-term contracts. We have done that for quite a number of contracts lately, and this is to maintain operations when we are still not fully covered. So when we have a long-term contract actually until 2049, that's because we believe we will have at least one plant left in Europe in 2049. Hopefully, we will have many more. I think that was it from my side. I will just mention maybe, because value chain has been mentioned, we are in the full value chain in our company. So what we have done for many years is to calculate the carbon footprint in every investment. We always do investment analysis, and we do a carbon footprint analysis. This is really an important guiding for where we are to invest. Barriers and opportunities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ronog, for your 3+1 there then. And I note the opportunities you've mentioned of non-ferrous metals as an enabler. You've got your experience over decades as really an electro-intensive industry, and your long-term experience also with the PPAs that you've been working on. And the barrier you pull out about indirect CO2 costs and cost compensation, something I'm sure Peter's going to mention as well. Okay, so Peter, I'll hand over to you now with a question. The Commission obviously is working to define the framework conditions for energy-intensive industries to decarbonise, but with the caveat, of course, of staying competitive. Almost in a sense, Daniele talked about that transformation towards decarbonisation while still protecting prosperity. With that in mind, what do you see as the barriers to industry's greater uptake of decarbonised electricity and collaboration with the power sector? And how is EU policy in the future going to deal with this?
Yeah, I see 3 points, I think. Firstly, I would say the alignment coherence challenge. This starts with the science informing the ambitious political choices, which then feed into developing a strategy and a plan of action. And this is where our work with the energy-intensive sectors, the electricity and gas providers, member states, think tanks, investors and civil society is an important illustration of the partnership principle. It also calls, as some have said, for much more policy coherence, whole of government approach at the national level, whole of Commission approach, and much more coherence between the different parts of the Parliament and Council on these issues. It also calls for a lot more coherence up the value chain from the end. So end consumers and downstream manufacturers should be calling much more for this due diligence and transparency of what's gone into making a product and how you can tell whether a product is good or less good. Second challenge I see is one of resource security for metals, minerals and biotic materials. This is part of a greater geopolitical security challenge, I think, which faces the world, and it can break down into ensuring access to these raw materials, which will be essential to the transition both of the energy system and the industrial system. It's secondly a challenge of sustainability, because we can't really afford to continue externalizing our environmental and social costs to less developed regions of the world. And thirdly, it requires much deeper material and energy efficiency, so that we need less energy and we produce fewer emissions. So that means a lot more mainstreaming of circular economy in the future as part of the industrial strategy. Third and last point is about partnership and integration between the energy and the industrial systems. This has to be much closer. The industry needs to define its needs, what kind of energy sources, where and when, and the different energy system providers need to be able to deliver, to show their capacity to deliver. And affordability is a key criterion for maintaining European competitiveness. We can help, I think, on the mapping of where all these things fit together. Where's industry, where's the energy needs, and where's the infrastructure? We need a much more integrated approach to the infrastructure system. Thank you.
So thanks, Peter. So alignment, using this partnership principle that we've all heard today, the Commission's been working on. Resource security. It's true indeed, if we don't have access to the things we need as enablers of decarbonisation is more of an image in our minds than a reality we can achieve. And also you mentioned coherence across the full value chain, with industry being clear about what it needs from the power sector and the power sector being responsive to that. Okay, Wendell, then, coming on to you. We've heard a lot about how civil society has to have that key role in all of this. So from a civil society and NGO perspective, based on what you've heard so far, are the energy-intensive and power sectors doing enough to overcome the sorts of barriers we've heard about, in your opinion? And how does this fit into the wider context of decarbonisation? Where do you see more is needed, more ambition may be needed, if at all?
Thank you, and again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to also speak in this panel. I mean, as you yourself, David, started the conversation or this workshop, there still is an enormous gap between what is needed, what was agreed in the Paris Agreement, the ambition to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, and what is currently being done. And I think the same applies for the energy-intensive sector as it applies for all sectors. And so we've heard a number of interesting examples of what companies are already doing. And I truly believe, and as civil society, we truly believe that there are a number of companies that are front runners. But in order to really bridge the gap, we actually need everybody on board. Not only civil society, not only workers, but actually also all of the companies we need on board. And I think that is an important element. And in order to really achieve those very ambitious objectives to limit temperature rise to 1.5, we actually need unprecedented innovation to happen. Innovation both in terms of technologies, but also innovation in terms of how we work together and how we actually bridge the silos between different sectors and so on and so on. So I think that is very important. As NGOs, obviously, we don't have a business case in terms of cooperation with companies, but we do work with companies, as previous speakers have already mentioned. And we have a number of those positive examples where we do so. But actually, our main role is in advocating for the right policy frameworks to be established to ensure that companies engage and that the energy-intensive industry engages in this exercise. And within that policy framework, we believe that there's kind of broadly three main elements that are important. Again, already set targets. I think it's extremely crucial that policymakers set the right targets that are sufficiently ambitious. We don't need targets that are easily to reach. We need targets that actually are targets and that are real objectives and that challenge all the different players to get there. Having potentially our leaders agree on a net zero emission scenario or a vision for Europe is important. After that, we definitely need this to be translated into strategies, including sectoral strategies and a real decarbonization strategy for the industrial sector. Secondly, we need a regulatory framework. We need to ensure that it's not only the good examples that do things, but actually we need to ensure that all companies are obliged to certain standards and certain efforts to be made in terms of the circular economy, in terms of energy efficiency, and so on. And thirdly, for us, what is extremely important is the price signals in both directions. A strong price on carbon, including a strong implementation of the emissions trading scheme, but also getting rid of fossil fuel subsidies, which still are abundantly available in Europe. But also on the other side, strong measures to ensure that there is the ideal framework for both public and private finance to be funded towards the positive solutions, and that it moves away from everything that is still continuing the carbon economy. So for us, those are kind of three elements of a regulatory framework that needs to be established.
Thanks, Wendell. So clear targets, clear regulatory framework, an end to fossil fuel subsidies, leveraging on ETS, and really trying to encourage public-private investment where it's needed. Right, quickly before we open up for some questions, our panelists, any reflections from anyone on what we've heard so far? Any counter comments you'd like to make? Okay, that's very, very positive and pleasant to see. Right, anybody in the room have a question they'd like to pose to our panel? If so, we're not using Slido, we'll put our hands up. So if anybody in the room has something that they particularly like to ask at this stage, then feel free, now is your time. I'm looking around. Yeah, we've got one question over here. Could I ask, when you come with a question, ladies and gentlemen, could you state your name and could you state the organisation that you represent and then pose as a question, please? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mukund Bhagwat from European Copper Institute. We heard a lot of very interesting and progressive things. And the question is to the civil society representative. I heard that they will like to put ambitious targets for the industry. I was wondering if you will also put ambitious targets, for example, for recycling, so that the society brings back and takes part in the circular economy, so that we are able to indeed improve the material efficiency as well as energy efficiency, because if you have dismantled, as Ronok mentioned properly, the energy consumption is only 5% of the total. So that's the first question. Am I allowed to ask?
Let's try that first one, and then we'll see if anyone else comes in there, and I'll come back for a second one if needed. Okay? So, Wendell, do you want to take that then? So society's role to balance industry in terms of dealing with this.
Yes, I mean, obviously we don't have a specific target for recycling as climate NGOs. There's other NGOs that are more into that. But as I said, I think for us it's very important that we have an overall vision of where we need to go to, and that is being translated in sectoral strategies. And as part of those sectoral strategies, obviously we need to look at kind of how do we make the circular economy function, how do we ensure that we promote recycling and reuse as much as possible, but actually also part of that is how do we look at material efficiency so that we actually have a lower need for materials before we start using it and then go into recycling and reuse, etc.
Yeah, I think, again, it's a little touching upon what Peter and other speakers mentioned in terms of this need for policy synergy between energy, climate, circular economy, issues where I think we've had an acknowledgement that there's more space to tighten those synergies in the future. And Peter, if you'll allow me a quick question to you as well, before I think Daniele has a question. What can we expect from the next Commission? I know it's an unfair question to ask at this stage of the year, but what could we expect, let me make it hypothetical, from the next Commission in terms of focus on really tightening up those different so-called policy silos?
I can't say anything about that.
I had a feeling you might mention that. Okay, Daniele, over to you.
No, I just wanted to comment. Part of my role is overlooking developments throughout the world in the 30 countries in which we operate and the speed of the transition, because we have 16 billion euros in our investment plan and we need to make sure that we deploy them in the next 5 years. And when I look at countries, we're all aware of the multiple benefits of the energy transition. And it's not only decarbonization, it's air quality, it's security of supply, it's energy efficiency, it's noise reduction. So when you have synergies between those benefits, things move a lot faster, and we've seen that in China. So in that sense, I think this connection also, which is becoming stronger and stronger with the circular economy, which is another side, additional benefit of the energy transition in our eyes of electrification, will play a fundamental role, because it's about getting the greatest benefit for that euro invested, and the more benefits you can line up behind an electric vehicle. We've seen that with electric vehicles. They've taken off when it wasn't not just about climate change, but it was about air quality. And I'm sure that the next thing people are going to realize, it's also about noise abatement, which is a big plague that we just don't realize anymore how important it is.
I have to confess, 4 months ago I was chairing a panel with the health commissioner and key health players in the Austrian mountains, rather pleasant environment to do a session. And they were talking about, we want energy, climate and economy people on our panels to talk about health. Now you're talking about the idea that we need health people on our panels to talk about climate and energy in terms of wider societal benefits. Do we have any representatives of health policy making here in the room? Ah, wonderful. One, I see one. Okay, wonderful. Next time you can join our panel. Well, if you have a question, by the way, about health benefits, feel free to come in. Okay, reflection made. Any further questions or reflections from the audience here? I know we have a second question pending here. Yes, please.
You all mentioned electrification and renewables as say, the solution. Of course, I quite agree that's the ideal solution to get there towards decarbonization. But is it enough to also achieve the climate goals fast enough, or do you also see needs for carbon capture and storage and other, that kind of, say, more controversial solutions? How do you see that?
Okay, well, I'll throw that one to the whole panel and come in as you prefer on that. So do we go with what we've already mentioned, or do we also investigate, bearing in mind this pressing need for acceleration, the so-called more controversial options in our armory as well? Peter?
Can I just ask the speaker to identify themselves first?
Sorry, Anne-Mette Jorgensen from Eco-Effective Strategies.
Okay. If we're going for, and let's hope we get a decision this week on a net zero by 2050, that means virtually getting rid of all greenhouse gas emissions, but not all of them. I mean, just by the laws of science cannot be got rid of. So you need offsetting, and part of the offsetting solution is going to be the carbon that comes out of industrial processes. You have to do something with it. Now, some of that can be using it in a circular economy kind of way in other industrial processes to replace fossil fuels, but it can also be about the storage. And that means the storage and the transport of this kind of thing, and it also raises all the questions about societal acceptance. But it's definitely part of the policy mix, it has to be.
From your side, Peter, an essential part of the policy mix. Anyone else want to come in on that particular point?
Yeah, I think there's two points here. I mean, we need to move as fast as we can with the existing technologies that we have today, and that it's not just renewables. You know, there's also solar cooling, there are heat pumps. You know, that you have more options than just renewables today. And secondly, I think we know from the IPCC report, but also from the European decarbonization scenarios, that we will need all solutions, and I don't think we can afford today to exclude some of them because we think they're controversial. And yes, of course, you know, we need to pay attention to what other impacts there are on the environment and on people. And I think, you know, on that will also include CCS. It will also include hydrogen. It will include bioenergy. And I think when we're thinking about the net part of the zero, then there's also natural climate solutions, because in a way we have the biggest solutions out there already. It's a tree, it's forests, it's wetlands, it's all of that. And you know, how can we also use those, knowing that you know, they're also limited, of course, but we can't afford to exclude them neither.
Okay, so really then I think there seems to be a bit of a broad consensus along this line that a truly multifaceted strategy is essential. It's natural, of course, we sometimes view things like renewables. I think my reflection is they take a lot of policy priority because of the key role they'll have in decarbonisation, but the message here is coming across, let's consider other options that will be part of the package too. I've got a few people wanting to come in. First Wendell, and then Daniele, I'll bring you in, and then anyone else in the audience.
Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting one. I mean, I want to, again, come back to something that has been said before, which I should have said actually, is that it is, of course, extremely crucial that we do emission reductions as fast as possible now and within the next 10 years as kind of a litmus test of whether we're actually going to be able to prevent dangerous climate change. And in those scenarios, obviously, CCS is not yet being able to play a role. So let's in the short term definitely focus on what we can do through renewables, etc., etc. And there might be a need for CCS and other or CC and use at a later stage. But let's again there look at the fact that storage capacities will be extremely limited. If we want to do that in a sustainable way, it needs to be limited. So this cannot be a solution kind of just for whatever problems we have. Secondly, that there's an economic issue that at the moment carbon capture and storage and use is extremely costly. And so we need to see whether actually that is a solution that we can use. So definitely a call that is only a very limited solution and that we need to invest more in renewables, not only renewable electricity, but also sustainable renewable gas, and so on before kind of putting CCS forward as the potential solution for everything we don't know yet.
So you're suggesting we go with what we know and prioritise what we know, but don't discount it as an option we can use. And Daniele, you signalled you wanted to intervene as well.
Yeah, I think in our study, and again, there's an executive summary and a long version of the report, we actually look at some of the niches where electrification is harder, aviation, long haul, heavy-duty transport. On the short, electrification is already a reality, and some high-temperature industrial processes. So there's definitely some niches where biofuels will be playing a very important role, synthetic. As far as CCS, as you probably know, the power sector has mixed feelings about it. Very long time to recover CCS projects, so it's a big risk for investors because how quickly technology moves, very easily you can end up with a big stranded asset there. So in that sense, maybe NCSs are more resilient to technological change and how things are changing so quickly. But in our report, we also see a role for these technologies. But I would echo, let's work on those technologies, but make sure that we accelerate deployment on what's already there. There's a lot of technology that are there that you can actually accelerate just by changing the regulation. And you can do wonders with that because you help the market get better and improve their technologies.
Okay, we've got time for one or two more reflections before we conclude with the panel. Is anybody? Yes, please. Remember to also identify yourself, please.
Yes, hi. My name is André Langus. I'm a French-German lawyer, specialized in renewable and energy efficiency, and I'm heading Eurosolar France. I would like to make a reference on Wendell. I think what is important is that we have a look what kind of storage facilities do we have and what kind of potential. What little people know, for example, in France, EDF made in the 80s some studies for hydro storage. There's quite a lot of potential, something like they could add another 150%, which is not exploited. It could be cost efficient, but at that period of time, EDF decided to do something different. And now they try a little bit to hide all these elements that have been done in the 80s. Then I think it's as well important to stimulate research. Right now there's an ongoing research project on artificial photosynthesis. By the way, I think in 1 hour or so is a pitch from the guy who won H2020 project with the only project that had 5 out of 5 points. So I think if we can replace for example, right now, non-sustainable petrol by sustainable petrol, who is, well, let's say, climate neutral. I think we can accelerate a lot and maybe even bring, let's say, the traditional industry car makers inside, but they need as well to invest. the only electricity right now, I think it's not the solution. We need hydrogen cars, yes. If that is a long-time solution, I don't know. But we need to try. And then what we really need is a trans-European industry initiative. Some of you might know that there's a project that Professor Eike Weber, former president of Fraunhofer, developed in 2013. That one of the little things that François Larc did well was he said it could be Airbus of energy. I think now is a relaunch to do that. And if we try to bring back as well PV production industry to Europe for European jobs, and was covering the entire value chain, and do that with a very low carbon footprint, I think that would be a large advance in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your reflections. I don't know if anybody wants to pick up on any of the points raised. We've got space for one more question or reflection if there's anybody. If not, Daniele, a final note.
I just wanted to make a comment on Peter's statement earlier when we were talking about mapping. I think it's important, just as we're looking at grids going in two directions, it used to be one direction to the other. I think similarly, when we look at the industrial sectors and the electricity sector, it's not only a uniflow with us providing something to them, but it's actually increasingly them providing something to us through services, through storage, through demand-side response. So it's important. That's why the grids are important, because they allow this flow of goods and services between the energy sector and the industrial sector to become bidirectional. And that is creating, I think, a lot. It's actually uncovering value that we hadn't suspected, and it's going to allow to reduce those costs of decarbonization that we need so badly.
Okay, thanks. And Ronald, would you like to add a point?
Yeah, if I can, I guess we are moving towards the end. And as a closing remarks from my side, I want to say two things. And one thing is that it's obvious that we need together authorities, business and industries to drive demand in the right directions. And in that context, I didn't mention it, but in that context, I think we also have to develop LCAs, the life cycle analysis assessments, to have to develop methodology to do that, because in order to have the really low carbon living, we have to have that perspective into our demand. And the other point is, again, the carbon leakage mitigation. But I also want to say what we are asking for is level playing field. So it's short-term in the transition phase to make sure that we can manage, because this is huge extra cost in the EU. But on long-term, the climate diplomacy that EU is working on just have to continue. We just have to, because today there's no CO2 in the electricity cost outside Europe. This is what is giving us the disadvantage. So we just have to work towards this level playing field. So there's short-term actions and there's long-term actions that we have to work on. Thank you.
Yeah, that you see need to be integrated and enabling in that sense. For the rest of our panelists, just for a final word, I believe our health sector representative would indeed like to come into the discussion. I'm very pleased to hear.
Yes, only the air quality. The air quality in the metro is awful. The air quality near the school is awful. The air quality in the town are awful. And the only solution is the electrical car to make that better. And if we want to see on the healthcare point of view, that's not the same solution than if we don't see this point of view. For example, for our town, the only solution is not to bring more public transport. That's not the good solution. It's the electrical car. There's the only solution to help the air quality of Brussels to grow, to be better.
Okay, thank you. I note, and I think it's something that's been touched upon by one or two of our speakers, talking about wider societal benefits of decarbonisation. The health sector at the moment, high on its agenda, and Peter's nodding, I know he's familiar with this, as many of you might be, is air pollution. I'd also note that as we go out into Brussels, into Schumann Square, my advice from a health perspective is hold your breath, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? So with that, I'll now come to our... as long as you can manage. Myself, I can do about 2 minutes. I'm quite fit. Health and mind. So So to bring us to a close then, ladies and gentlemen, I'll call on our panellists to give a very brief final word, a couple of sentences. Ronald, you've already done that for us. And then Maria, I'll just have one or two questions for you just to cap things off as well. And then we can all be freed up, ladies and gentlemen, for coffee and refreshments before future sessions. So Peter, I'll come straight on to you, please.
Yeah, I think it's time to crack on with setting a high level of political ambition and then coming out with a good, solid 2050 plan for Europe next year. And my hope is that by then we'll have done all the necessary thinking about what this means for the industrial transformation. We'll have the work on strategic value chains, we'll have the results of the industrial transformation master plan, and we'll have a future industrial strategy. So I think we lock the industrial strategy with all those elements together with the 2050, and it should provide reassurance that industry is ready to engage on this process.
Thanks. And Wendell, moving on to you.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I can only support what Peter just said. I think it's important for the European Union to kind of create clarity of where it wants to go to. Europe has played quite a leading role, including European businesses, in this decarbonization process. But the last couple of years, other countries are clearly catching up. And if we look at the last 5 years, actually many of the other big economies in the world have done much more in terms of real emission reductions than happened in Europe. And so it's time for Europe to make it very clear that we actually want to be part of this transition movement of the future, and that we actually want to create the right framework for our businesses to further develop.
Thanks, Wendell. And Daniele, finally, I'll move on to you. A couple of brief closing words.
No, as it started, I think cross-sectorial partnerships are key, and we need to make sure that the policy engages it with cross-sectorial policies. So I'm looking forward to the climate energy plans actually becoming climate energy industry and social plans. And I think we're doing a lot of progress in Brussels on it, and I congratulate the Commission for that progress. We need to make sure that that trickles down to the member states. And I think those plans have forced member states to actually start working more across silos. And it's a good trend, but we need to accelerate it.
I'll note there, Daniele, I think the idea of once we've got our policy integrated in place and then we move to the finer points of integration may well be a session at next year's Sustainable Energy Week. Okay, have a brief round of applause for our panellists, please, ladies and gentlemen. And also a big thanks on my side for taking the time to join us and to share your views and reflections. Just to close off then and send you all off well to coffee, tea or other refreshments you may prefer, I want to come back to our opening speaker who framed the session for us. That's Maria Mendeluce, the Managing Director of WBCSD. And I've got two questions for you, just to cap things, which is from your side, you've been following the discussion that you opened, obviously. Based on what you've heard from our speakers, from Mariana, from your own organisation, from Sam, from Yara, from our representative panel of the different stakeholder groups, what stood out for you?
Thank you. Thank you all for the great interventions. So I'll present the story of the panel. I hope I reflect well what has been discussed, which was quite, we have gone into a high level of detail in some areas, and we have brought many topics that I think will require hours and hours of discussion. I think the first one is that we are all in a journey. Policymakers are going to approve, because we think that you're going to approve this net zero. Well, we are encouraging policymakers to approve, governments to approve this net zero goal. And the industries, many industries are backing behind, and they're setting their own science-based targets, and they're going into this journey. And the journey starts by identifying the opportunities and risks of the energy transition and climate change. Those opportunities and risks are reflected in the strategy of companies, and therefore on the targets and goals that some companies are setting, and all within alignment of the SDGs. This was well explained by Mariana and ratified at Yara, that they are going through that journey. And within that journey, one thing stood up very clearly, that partnerships are going to be quite important. Partnerships across the value chain, across departments, across procurement activities in the companies, but also within the policy making as well, partnerships between different departments. So this is not the energy, as Daniele rightly pointed, this is about innovation, this is about the social dimension, this is about the growth of Europe in the next 20, 30 years. So this to set those plans are not going to be easy, and I encourage policymakers to work more closely with business as they're setting those directions, because the business have the solutions to some of these problems, have a lot of technology know-how, and they understand how to implement this in the marketplace, and it's not good for anyone, nor business, nor policymakers, to do this in isolation. We need together to make these plans. Then, as we're making these plans, to me it stood up quite clearly, it was also my remarks, the social dimension is really important, because we're looking at big transformation of different sectors, and that will mean changing jobs and redefining the future of jobs in many industries. Some companies are going through that journey. I think as the EU sets their social policies, they need to integrate those social policies within the transformation that the EU is looking for. Then we talk about policy coherence. I think it was well agreed, business needs stable regulatory frameworks. Even the European Commission would like some coherence in their national and regional states, and I think we are all for this, and that requires a lot of negotiations. It also requires cross-party agreements, and we encourage the new European Commission and different bodies, to clearly work on that, because we just don't have time to be fighting against each other. We need to work together. And then there were lots of things that were discussed. I will mention them very quickly, but very important. Circular economy is going to become mainstream. Really important, because we don't have enough resources to feed 10 billion people living in this planet by 2050. The issue of health, extremely important. I was quite surprised this morning on the news. I saw the map of Europe with the different air quality levels. I find that's incredible, really good that we raise awareness on the people that are going and are making choices every day. And by the way, yes, Brussels looked didn't look too good today in those charts. And then we talk about solutions. We talk about CCS, and it was, we have been speaking about CCS for so long with the same arguments over and over. But the reality is that the IPCC scenarios talk about vast removal of CO2, and I'm not sure. We should then, if we're not going to do CCS, accelerate nature climate solutions. And that means that the European Union needs to be a little bit more open to encourage that to happen, and that's quite important for the climate negotiations, finalizing Article 6 and providing that flexibility to companies that need these solutions on the transition. And then, of course, we talk about electrification, hydrogen, etc. I cannot go into the full detail. The last message before we go to the coffee break, that I hope it inspires you to discuss further. It's let's get started. Let's get started now, because we just don't have more time. It was really rightly said by Mariana, but the rest of the panelists. And let's get started by thinking much more smartly about how we can get started with our value chains. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, then our takeaway messages based on all we've heard and heard summarized is let's get started, let's continue with the ambition, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a break and have some coffee. Thank you very much.
Was good? Yeah, was it? Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. No.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to share that session. My name is Vincent Berruteau. I'm the head of the Energy Unit at the Executive Agency for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. My unit is managing the energy efficiency call for proposals and projects supported under the Energy Challenge of Horizon 2020, those projects which address energy efficiency. So we are responsible for the energy efficiency part of Horizon 2020. I'd like to welcome you very warmly to this session where we will hear about innovative approaches to empower energy consumers. And this session is somehow a response to yesterday's plenary, where many speakers recall the importance of engaging consumers and putting them at the center of the energy system and empowering them to reduce their energy use. By consumer, we will mean here in this session individual natural persons, and that's what we mean by consumers. And the solutions that you will hear about today have been supported by EU funding, and most of them, all but one, by the Horizon 2020 program. So these are projects that we are following, monitoring in the EASME. In total, we've supported more than 100 projects addressing consumers. And these projects have covered a whole range of methods to engage consumers. So we've had household visits, competitions, use of apps, platforms, other tools. We had projects on the group purchasing, energy cooperatives, a wide range of different approaches. We've also had a wide range of target groups being covered, from households to students to employees in companies, energy poor consumers, and so on. So that's these 100 projects are very diverse, as you can imagine. We've selected 5 of them for this event this morning, 5 that we considered were interesting to hear about this morning. So we'll hear about what they've done, what solutions they've developed and tested, but we will also hear from the project coordinators about some tips, do's and don'ts when it comes to engaging consumers. So we want to learn from their experience in their projects together with their partners on how to engage consumers. We'll have 2 parts on this in this session. The first part will be a pitching session where all the speakers will present for about 5 minutes what they've done in their projects, what solution they are proposing to empower the consumers. And then we'll move to the second part of the session, which will be a panel debate where we'll ask them questions, and you will be also invited to ask questions if you wish about this subject, important subject of consumers' engagement. And this workshop is all the more important today as we are in the process now of shaping future programs to support energy consumers. Horizon Europe, which will be the successor of Horizon 2020, the research and innovation program, but also the LIFE program, where we will continue under standalone sub-program called Clean Energy Transition, activities related to the market uptake of energy efficiency and renewable energy solutions. So this is an important moment for us, and we would like to use as well the Slido tool, which you may be familiar with now after this first day in the USEF, and which I'm introducing now is this slide, which you can open using your browser and connecting to Slido, and then typing the code, which is #USEF19, and where you can type either questions that you want to ask the participants, the speakers to these sessions, or, and that's also very important, if you want to suggest priorities for funding for after 2020. So if you consider that, let's say, between 2021 and 2027, there are particularly important areas where we need to dedicate more funding, then please indicate that. It's a consultation that we want to open now, And we will, of course, take these elements into consideration when it comes to defining the future work programs, future funding priorities. The Slido tool will also be used at the end of that session to collect your inputs on your feedback on the session and use that in general. So that will also enable us to improve future events of this kind. And without further ado, I think I'd like to move to the pitching session now and welcome our first speaker, who is Jane Monroe. And Jade is Senior Sustainability Officer at the National Union of Students in the UK, an organization that represents 7 million students in higher and further education. She has worked on sustainability behavior change in UK university for the last 10 years. So Jade, the floor is yours.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so yeah, my name is Jade and I'm here from the National Union of Students to talk to you about students achieving valuable energy savings, or we shorten it to SAVES. So the aim of the project is very much a behaviour change project, and we want to help to reduce energy usage and exposure to fuel poverty to over 200,000 students, and that's in over 7 European countries. So we do this through energy efficiency competitions in their dormitories, and also empowering some energy smart decisions when they're renting in the private sector. The impacts of the project is that we will be saving a lot of energy, so we will be on track to save over 30 gigawatt hours of electricity over the 3 academic years that we run the project. And we're reaching a huge amount of students within that. So it's 114,000 with information on energy efficiency within their student dormitories, and over 100,000 students on private rented information to reduce their fuel poverty. And we are a consortium of 11 organisations across 8 countries, and that includes universities, student unions, and a networking organisation. So for us, the real main aim of the project is to engage, inform, and empower students. So the first approach that we took to this was that we really tried to look at our audience key traits. So we started off with knowing that students, when they first move into their student dormitories, they often have very few incentives to save energy. A lot of the time, student dormitories have their bills fully included in the rent, or it's heavily subsidised. And we've looked at a behaviour change method called the moment of change, which says that when you go into a period of change in your life, which is often a student moving out of home and potentially living on their own for the first time, that's when your behaviours can really form. So if a student is going into the halls of residence or their dormitory and they're getting into really bad energy behaviours, that can go with them for a very long time in their lives. We also identified that students have an experience gap. So initially I was going to put here a knowledge gap, but I actually think consumers of all ages can have a knowledge gap within the energy sector. But I think for students in particular, it's very much an experience gap as well, in that this will be the first time that they're potentially moving out of home, having to look at how much energy costs, looking at energy suppliers, managing their bills, and managing that whole process. Other key traits of students are that they're a mobile population. Many students will live in a different house every year, so that has different kind of things that comes up with that, as well as the poor quality housing that lots of students will face. So we know it's really disengaging for students who want to be able to save energy, but are spending huge amounts in their private rented sector home because the houses are cold and they're damp and they're not very efficient, and their landlord is doing absolutely nothing to it. And then they move out of that home and another group of students move in and have exactly the same experience in the next year. So to kind of look at all of those audience key traits that we think are quite unique to the student population, we created 2 campaigns. So we have the Student Switch Off campaign, which is a dormitory energy saving behaviour campaign. So essentially what we do is we offer an incentive for students to save energy within their student dormitories. So we run lots of competitions, and they can win that at the dormitory level, and they can also win it as an individual level. And we do a whole host of face-to-face engagement. So me and my colleagues spend a lot of time going around student dormitories and actually talking to students and finding out what their concerns are and sort of mentoring them through that process of saving energy. We do regular progress updates, so students can look online and see how their student dormitory is doing, and that is often updated on a day-by-day basis, so they can really track their progress through the year. And one of the really key points for us is to have student ambassadors at the heart of that. So we train up students very early on in the academic year, and they're the ones that then go out and speak to their peers and spread that message on a peer-to-peer level. And then following on from Student Switch Off, we have the Student Switch Off Plus project, which is to reduce exposure to fuel poverty when they then move into the private rented sector. And again, this is lots of engagement, but we have a greater focus on consumer choices, smart metering, thermal controls, energy performance. So it's very much moving it along from energy saving to being more energy smart consumers. For us, our approach to kind of get empowerment of students is firstly to make sure that all of those audience key traits we know very well, and we're really tailoring our campaigns to meet those. We also make sure that we're tailoring our campaign to meet them in a way that we know that students will engage with. So a lot of it is done via social media, but essentially wherever students are, we're there. So we've been on student radio, we get student blogs, we've got information in student handbooks, we go to events. We're really at those places where we know that students will engage with us. We want to make sure that it's a campaign of empowerment and collaboration. So we really try to focus on the positive element of that. So what we don't do is go around and fine students or tell students off if they're not doing the right thing, like they've left their light on. But we want to have really positive engagement when they are doing the right thing. And we have the collaborative element through our student ambassadors and that peer-to-peer element, which we know is the most effective way to spread the message. And then the last kind of element of our approach is this, that we are a trusted source. So I think this can be a real barrier to lots of people trying to get the message out there about energy decisions. In the, we don't really, you already have to break the barrier down of you think someone might have an ulterior motive or trying to sell that to you. So we're based within student unions, universities, accommodation departments, academic departments. So we really have that method of trust. So kind of using all of those things I've spoken about in terms of knowing our audience and our approach, we're getting really good results in regards to engaging and informing and empowering our students. And then here's the last slide, which just gives you a little bit more information about us, when our project started, who is included in the countries within our project. And there is a link there that has all of our documents and resources and reports as well for you to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jade. And you're being very modest because you did not mention that you were one of the finalists yesterday of the European Sustainable Energy Week Awards. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Yes. And we're turning to the second project, second solution that we would like to present. There will be time for questions at the end of the pitching session. Don't worry. You can also send them on the Slido and we will collect them. The next speaker is Johannes Reicherl, is project manager at the Energy Institute of the Johannes Kepler University in Linz in Austria. He is an applied statistical researcher, and his current research focuses on the development of energy efficiency measures and the quantification of energy savings from such measures. Johannes?
Thank you. I'm coming from an Austrian research institution. My name is Johannes Reicherl, and today I may present to you outcomes of a project that is called PEAKapp. And PEAKapp is the Personal Energy Administration Kiosk application. So you already guessed right that it is a smartphone application that we have developed, and our way of empowering and engaging consumers was to connect, to provide consumers an interface for their energy consumption and in particular to their electricity smart metering data. For us, it was very important to have a zero investment approach of empowering consumers. We wanted to give them access to, well, the energy transition without the need of making any investments, so that we could take all these people on board that felt a bit left behind before because they were not able in like investments before. So I said we've developed an app. Very briefly, we had a lot of functionalities that we provided to these people, exploiting their smart meter data, some of them a bit more basic, like of course we provided them information about their energy consumption in monetary terms, in terms of CO2, but also of course in kilowatt hours. But we also had some I believe, more and very innovative ways of engaging the people. For example, we have regularly sent them push messages when there was a lot of sun and wind electricity in the European grids, and told them, for example, tomorrow from 12 to 3 p.m. there will be a lot of sun out there, and you get a discount of 50% on every kilowatt hour that you consume in that time, to see whether people were ready to take an action and change their behavior. Yeah, so, and we have tested this app over 18 months, actually, in the end it was, with more than 3,500 Europeans from 4 different countries. Actually, we exceeded our target of 2,500 users quite significantly, and I will now briefly report on the results that basically just came in now, because our project ends by the end of this month. And I will report on the results of the Austrian field test, because there we had a setting that I believe is quite exceptional with respect to the scientific thoroughness. We have recruited about 1,600 Austrian households, and I have divided them randomly into 3 groups. Each of the group got a different set of functionalities, including one group that did not get anything, but allowed us just to record their smart meter data so that we could compare what these non-serviced households would do in comparison to the households that got our app. And from the results from these 18 months of field testing, we could derive quite a number of results. One of the first result is that, of course, not all people will use an app and engage with it over the whole period of 18 months. But we had a quote of 20% people that stayed active till the very end of our field tests, and I believe that 20% is quite a good ratio. We called them the heavy users, and for these heavy users we saw that they decreased their energy consumption by about 7% over our field test, and whenever we sent them a push message to increase their electricity consumption during a specific time to consume mostly renewable electricity, they have increased their energy consumption by about 8%, which even on the average over all 1,000 households still remains a positively significant increase of about 1%. So people are obviously willing to change their behavior based on price signals, and they do so for a continuous time. Another result is, most importantly for electricity retailers, the churn rates of those groups that were provided with the app decreased by about 33%. So if people get this direct connection to their energy provider, like through such an app, then they will stay as a partner of this energy utility much longer than others do. We also provided households a mechanism to compare their own consumption to the consumption of other but comparable households. And we actually see that those households that belonged to the households with low energy efficiency increased actually their energy efficiency quite significantly. So this is also a mechanism that obviously engages people with their energy consumption. And as a last result that I want to share with you, we wanted to test whether households can actually function as supporters of balancing the grid. So on the 25th of September last year at 6 p.m. we sent them a push message and told them, if you decrease your energy consumption over the next 15 minutes by at least 50%, then you will get a reward. The reward was varying to have some additional experimental variation. And we provided this push message to about 1,000 of our households, and 40% of them actually achieved their saving targets. So this is an extremely high number of response. And what we saw then in the load profiles, which was very impressive to us, is most people did not just switch off, I don't know, their dishwasher or their television, but most people actually got to the main electricity switch in their house and kicked it out for 15 minutes. So they decided to take a rather radical step to make sure that they have achieved what target we did set them. So, as a closing statement, I would say that we often hear that in particular households are somewhat a passive mass, just absorbing the electricity tariffs that are provided through them through different companies. But we got the impression that households are very, very ready to act. They just need the right tools to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johannes. I'm impressed by the app. I'm also impressed by the scientific approach to the testing. I think that's quite remarkable. We move now to Belgium with Dominique van der Wiel, who is project manager in the city of Lidl in Belgium. And the city where he works enabled the establishment of the sustainable energy and climate policy for 13 different cities and municipalities within the Covenant of Mayors framework. And he's going to talk about the refurb project.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I will discuss about the refurb project. It's a project that actually has finished already in 2018, but it's good to communicate about the results there. So the project is focused on renovation of single houses, of private-owned houses. And we're looking into deep renovation, deep energy renovation, so really reducing the energy consumption 50 up to 80%. And we were especially looking into removing the non-technological market barriers. It's a quite complex explanation. Well, to see, we said, well, everything is there, the technologies are there. It's simple renovating in a house, technically, from a technical perspective. Solutions are there, the market solutions are there, but somehow there is a mismatch between the demand side, what homeowners want, and the supply side, what is offered. So we're looking into that interface. How can we improve that? So that was our focus, to set up then regional home renovation programs in 6 countries with the one-stop shop. What exactly is a one-stop shop? One-stop shop means that there's a lot of information available, services available for homeowners, but they are not integrated, and they all tackle a certain problem, a certain issue, a certain barrier a homeowner meets. But we believe that integrating them better will enable more homeowners to go for that deep energy renovation. And we're focusing on the homeowner as a decision maker, because that's very important. We can think about a lot of policies focusing on the worst homes, the ones that use the most energy, and try to tackle those homes. But we need to reach those homeowners, because they finance, they take the decisions, they have to organize the works, etc. So we came up, what I want to share with you, we can share a lot of things of the project, but I want to share with you this approach of the customer journey. And this is a concept that we came up with. Our Dutch partner was working on that, which means that it's something coming from marketing. And it looks into the decision-making process of a homeowner. And the first, it has 11 steps. The first 3 steps are rather on communication, try to convince homeowners they are aware that energy renovation, energy is an important thing, so they get convinced. So that takes a lot of efforts. Then they need to take decisions, or they need to consider what are the different options. They need to secure their finance, and then they need to implement everything. So you see that for a homeowner, for this energy renovation, they go to a lot of steps, and they need a lot of expertise, whereas for home renovation, well, they only do it once in a lifetime, and well, most of the people are amateur, they're not professionals, and they're confronted with a lot of professionals telling them all different kinds of things, which is very confusing. I give a very clear example. If you discuss with your contractor or your plumber, it's a person that has 30 or 40 years experience. Well, my plumber, he said, well, let's install some heating installation. I calculate based on the square meters of the rooms you have, and I can advise you this. but I'm an engineer, so I calculated everything, of course, and it was 3 times too much. He would advise me. Of course, he's right. I would have my house would have been warm enough. That's not the issue, but you have a lot of people in that whole process that gives a lot of advice, not always in the same direction. And we expect as policymakers that the change will come from homeowners, that they have the mission, that they are so secure about themselves to convince everybody, all these contractors, to do the right thing. But it's not working. So we need this customer journey approach and build this one-stop shop, try to involve all these stakeholders, the building sector, and try to build an offer that the homeowner can't refuse. So really, it's really a work on a local, regional level where you are closest to the customer, the homeowner, where you have a building sector that you can reach, and to organize this aligned with this customer journey. And this is, according to us, the basics of a successful regional renovation program, because we discovered that there is a lot of potential of people that want to renovate, but there's a huge dropout because of all these stumbling blocks along the way, that very few people arrive into a good energy renovation. And the policy should be having more people starting this customer journey and less dropout. And then we will be successful in reaching much more homeowners to renovate their house to nearly zero energy standards. You can find some results and deliverables on the website of Refurb. I can redirect you to this, but I will leave the floor again to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominique. I mean, one-stop shops is something we've been supporting more and more in the program, and we will continue to support. I'll come back to future funding opportunities later on in the session. But for the time being, let's change country, move to France, and address a different sector, which is the sector of multifamily apartment blocks. And I'm glad to introduce Antoine Collin-Gogel, who's a lawyer at Île-de-France Energies, a public-private company specialized in the energy renovation of condominiums. It's been created by the French region of Île-de-France and offers condominiums a one-stop shop service on architectural, thermal, engineering, and financial solutions. So Antoine, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Yes. Yes, 5 minutes. Even though we have benefited from 2 European Edge 2020 programs, actually, one which is MLEI Positif, which was the question of launching this idea of one-stop shop for co-ownerships. And the second one, well, the first one was really focused on France. And the second one is Guarantee, which we have done with I think, 14 partners, and which has just ended in April. So you can find the results on the Île-de-France Energy website for the Positif, the first one, and on the Guarantee website for the Guarantee approach, which was more focused on the end guarantee of the process. We have the same problem here, which is we have people that are homeowners. They're not professionals. They don't know how to do deep renovations. And there is an added complexity, which is that they have to decide together. This is not one homeowner which has the say to what he's going to do. It's several homeowners in the same building that have to agree on what they are going to do, and they do not have the same investment cycles, they do not have the same financial possibilities, and they do not have the same interests. So it's pretty difficult to bring everyone on board. What we've been trying to do to tackle this issue is to bring everything into one single roof as a one-stop shop, with the basic idea that we would offer the energy performance contract, which we all know. Point is, it's a bit difficult to do that in France due to some legal uncertainties when we come to private business. On the one hand, and on the second hand, when you go towards non-professionals, we tend to try to make these contracts easier to follow, but actually they're pretty difficult. So what we've been trying to do is to emulate the system of EPC with different blocks, bringing together. So we have architecture and energy and engineering, and financial solutions and coaching of the co-owners. We have been carrying studies for 7,200 apartments. Half of them have approved the works, which is pretty big when you consider that in the Ile-de-France region, the market average is below 5%. So we are 10 times above the market average. It's working. The average investment is 25,000 euros per family, which is some level of investment to realize. And if you consider that 25% of the families are low-income families, you begin to understand that we will have difficulties. So what are the strong points? You need to have a one-stop shop. The consumers need to have someone they know they can talk to. 2, you need to have financial solutions. You can possibly have a single homeowner and he will be able to get 20,000 euros or 25. If you have a wide array of co-owners, a certain number of them will not be able to find that money by themselves, and well, they will vote against the program. But also the other co-owners will vote against too, because there's some sense of common solidarity. So you have to find financial solutions, mainly loans, that will bring costs down to monthly payments, and that's very important because it is commensurate to their everyday financial experience. They have difficulties to measure what a full investment of 20,000 euros means. If you tell them it's 45 euros a month, they can take the decision much more easily. You have to embed it in an operation that has to be done anyway. We are talking about buildings from the 60s, the 70s, which are beginning to get a bit too quickly old. So works have to be done anyway, and you just step in and you say, actually what you are going to do is additional works on top of that, which will pay back on energy savings and public subsidies. And of course, you have to do a lot of coaching. This takes a very lot of time. Yes. What we could do to have better outcomes, our findings. Subsidies are absolutely necessary, but they should be better targeted. One, they should go towards a global approach and not single measures like change your windows plus, because it becomes very difficult to follow for a single family. And they should target low-income families, which have bigger difficulties. If carbon tax were higher, it would be easier because the returns would be easier, but I think that's a problem we all have. And there should be better knowledge of green value and brown discount when you sell back your house, because then again, that's where you can have a commensurate vision of what 25 euro means. That's at the moment where you will have to sell or not. Well, I've already told most of that. Our average result is 84% energy reduction with 64 million investments, and which translates to above 1,000 jobs. And this has been replicated in now in 5 out of the other 13 regions in France.
Thank you very much, Antoine. That's quite an interesting project for us because it received funding indeed from the Intelligent Energy Europe program a long time ago.
And then it's something which continues even without the funding from the European Union budget. So there was a form of sustainability embedded in the project, which enabled it to continue afterwards. And that's quite interesting. And I know for having heard many of the several presentations on this project that it needs a lot of convincing, a lot of talks, a lot of meetings with the owners to convince them to engage in the work. So well done. Changing subject again, we come to the last presentation. We're moving now to the supply side, cooperatives, and I welcome Stanislas Derbemont, who's project manager at rescop.eu in Belgium, the European Federation of Renewable Energy Cooperatives, which is a growing network of more than 1,000 energy cooperatives. So Stanislas, you will talk from the supply side, but talk about energy demand management, right? Thank you.
Sure. So actually, it's good that I come right after that presentation because yes, community engagement is hard and it's taking a lot of time, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. So my name is Stanislas. I come from rescop.eu, and we built a project called Rescop Plus that worked on energy efficiency for energy cooperatives. For those of you who don't know what an energy cooperative is, it's a group of citizens that gets together and decide to act in the energy sector. On the supply side, of course, but also on different things like production, electric mobility, and also energy efficiency and renovation. Energy efficiency, that's what we're going to talk about today. We were a consortium of 12 partners with 8 cooperatives, supported by different academic partners and also us to try to spread the model around. The main thing that we focused on is what kind of things cooperatives can do around energy efficiency. What we did was focus on our members and specifically how to help them to use energy efficiency in order to bring the transition forward. The goal of an energy cooperative is to make a territory transition, is to help the local community to transition, and therefore energy efficiency is a key piece of that. So what did we look at? The first thing is our aim. We looked at community engagement in order to help private consumers, citizens, to be more energy efficient, both in terms of consumption, but also in terms of changing their appliances, changing the way they consume, and finally, being collective and supporting the weakest member of our communities through energy solidarity. We focused on the cooperative model simply because we see it as a collective dynamic of saving energy. Our impacts were for the last 3 years, about 29 gigawatt per year of primary energy savings, which is reasonable. And we engaged throughout the last 3 years in 12 countries, almost 200,000 citizens by different meetings, but also through community projects with the local cooperatives. So as you can see, we actually engaged citizens in countries that were not covered by the cooperative, that were part of the consortium. That's because we actually took a look at how we could actually spread the movement and also engage other citizens and support other cooperatives in their way to energy efficiency. What we were looking to figure out and to validate specifically was the fact that we had the feeling that being a member of a cooperative is actually a great way to be more energy efficient. By learning and understanding what energy is, consumers, citizens start to save energy simply because it makes sense. Because when you understand the system around you, then suddenly you start to figure out, okay, maybe I need to make an effort myself. And that is something that we actually validated with the project. Yes, here we go, perfect. So one of the things that we validated thanks to our academic partner was that upon joining a RESCOP is a renewable energy source cooperative, we realized that most members are actually saving up to 20% of their energy consumption, the yearly energy consumption. That consumption continues to go down as the years goes by. Of course, it goes less and less because, once you have the low-hanging fruits, you kind of have a kind of a flat line going on. The second thing is that once you are a RESCOP member, you tend to be demanding more energy efficiency schemes. So you tend to ask for your collective action to also bring you solutions to save energy, to renovate your building, to put solar panels on your roof, to do all kinds of actions in order to be more energy efficient. In order to help them do that, we built a toolbox that were to be deployed in different countries around Europe. So we selected out of 15 best practices from around Europe, 7 that we thought was the most impactful on the cooperative model and also our members throughout Europe. There's two types of energy efficiency tools that we used in that toolbox. The first half is on energy consumption itself and helping energy consumption change. And the second part is about district heating. And so, as you know, most of the energy consumption in the house is actually singly related to heating and cooling. And in that sense, we wanted also to be able to focus on that aspect of our members' houses. So let me present to you quickly the 7 principles. You can, of course, find them on our website, rescope-ee.eu. But if you want to know more, you can also contact our different experts. But I want to just pitch them to you very quickly. The first one is Energy ID. Energy ID is an online platform that helps you understand what is your supposed future consumption based on your previous consumption, and therefore help you understand the type of saving that you made. Infoenergia is a billing tool that is helping you understand the content of your bill and also how you are situated compared to other households that are similar to you. Dr. Watt is a mechanism brought by PEAKapp in France that is actually looking at how can you change your appliances to make them more efficient. So already you can see that we're touching all the levels of energy efficiency, both consumption and appliances. The single tariff system looks more at a solidarity mechanism. It's the fact that the cooperative will have one single simple price for all its members as a provider of energy. And that's in order to save energy because it's more simple on the bill. Finally, the 3 district heating mechanisms are the package approach, the technical support from Denmark, and then the optimized return flow from Italy. The 2 first ones are linked to deploying district heating and making it more efficient. Specifically, the technical support looks at the cooperative going into the houses of its member to make them understand that they are not very efficient in terms of how they use the district heating and how collectively we can help them to change their district heating installation. The goal here was to support the most consuming member of our communities. We're usually the members in energy poverty, of course. And finally, the optimized return flow is a mechanism that helps boost the efficiency of the district heating collectively. So that's basically try to aggregate the members together and make them understand how the district heating works in order to have a single temperature coming out back to the DSO, and so to lower the price that we have to pay back to the DSO for him to get the water back. So in terms of the results, as you can see, I put them on the side here. From EcoPower in Belgium, so that's the Energy ID program, we had almost a 30% reduction. From Spain and Infoenergia, we had almost a 28% reduction. From Dr. Watt in France, we had 13% reduction. And then from Energy ID in Belgium as well, we had 8.5%. So that's the single Energy ID program. And then for the single tariff system, we saw a 30% reduction. I'm going to put a little question mark around that figure simply because it also includes the 20% reduction that I talked about when you join the cooperative. So, of course, because this single tariff system applies to the entire members, that's also mixed together. Right. If you want to know more about our project, I invite you to visit our website, www.rescope-ee.eu. We are now finished, but most of those programs are still active in the different cooperatives, so I invite you to go and visit them. I'm sure that there's one near to you in your country. If you want to know more also about our statistical and behavioral analysis of the different impacts of those programs, you can also find them on our website. And finally, we looked at the kind of policies and barriers that we need to put in place in order to favor those programs and to boost them forward in different countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stanislas. Very clear, and that shows that cooperatives can bring more renewables, but also more savings. Before we move to the next part of that session, which is about panel discussion, I'd like to open the floor for questions to any of the 5 speakers. If you have questions, please introduce yourself quickly and then ask your question. Thank you. Sylvia tells me as well that we've got questions on Slido, so if there's no question from the room, maybe you can read one from Slido, Sylvia.
I mean, actually, there are many from Slido for all different speakers. So I don't know if you want to allow all of them. So for Saves 2, how can we expand this action towards other citizens? How can we make it contagious, for example, social housing? And then another question for you, how far this action has been collaborative, adaptive process, new ideas? Yeah. And then there is also an issue on how to engage students also, not only for sustainable energy, but also for reducing water consumption, recycling practices, and so on.
We'll maybe take another 2 questions while you think of your answer now. But Silvia, if you could read 2 more. Silvia's not ready. So Jade, I pass you the floor now.
Okay. Yes, and then on PEAKapp, have you explored how such an action could help with implementing saving measures for the Article 7 of the EED obligation on energy suppliers and utilities? Do you want any other one?
Jade, could I start with the first one? No, Silvia, Jade is going to start with the first one.
Okay, so I think the first element was on social housing. I definitely feel like the model is replicable. I do think, again, I guess it's about, like I was saying, about knowing your audience very well. So some of the things that will engage students won't engage people within the social housing element. But it's definitely an area that we're looking at kind of expanding into running these kind of energy saving campaigns and competitions with the same principle, but within office blocks or schools or different kind of methods as well. The water and recycling, so that's something that we do already. So this kind of focused on the energy element, but we also include water and recycling as part of our campaign. And different universities have options to kind of add that into their package as well. And then the collaborative element, so for us, I wasn't 100% sure on the question there, but for us, the collaborative element is very much like getting the students involved in that process and having people involved from all kind of elements of that student experience. So we have the academic departments kind of promoting the more ambassador training sessions, which has the skills for students and volunteering experience. We have the accommodation department sending out information, as well as the collaborative element of the students volunteering and sharing their information to their peers. Yep. Thank you.
Johannes? Yes, the question was whether the results from PEAKapp could eventually help energy companies to get their energy savings approved. In Austria, we have an agency that is responsible for approving energy savings in light of the Energy Efficiency Directive. And in the past, it has been very difficult to get measures addressing behavior only to get approved by that agency. So we do have, I hope, a realistic vision that with the scientifically thorough results of PEAKapp providing such an app system to electricity consumers will actually be approved and will help the providing energy utilities to achieve their targets. And I think that is a very important thing because utilities are at least somewhat reluctant so far to provide these kind of tools to their consumers because they will reduce the energy they can sell them. So we need to show them that these tools provide other good reasons why to do that. And I showed you about the impact on churn rates. That is a strong argument. So another good argument would be if these savings can help them achieve their energy savings targets. And so we will definitely this fall try to get our measures approved by the Austrian monitoring agency.
And then a question that could be, I think, both for refurb but also for energy positive. So the price for renovation is already quite high, and how can we motivate people and convince them that it's really important to go also for energy efficiency?
There are two ways we can do that. Basically, one way is saying that you need to do the works anyway. So let's do a greener building as you do the works, and you will get additional public support. People like to get public support, even if it doesn't pay for the full added costs, but they like it. The second is actually peer effect. If you manage to find in the neighborhood another building that has already done it, especially if it's social housing. If you're on a private co-ownership and the social housing has better standards than your building, then it's not very good in the neighborhood. So people want to keep up with the Joneses, and that's basically what I would say about this.
I can add some issues there. Well, energy generally is not on top of the list when people start to renovate their house, so it's a very difficult issue. However, people understand that their house needs to be, if they renovate it, it should be future-proofed, and they don't want to live in a house with old standards. So that really is accepted more and more, and that's really needed. It's like, well, why do you want to have a fancy car and a fancy iPhone or a fancy kitchen? It's just there, it's the standard, something that you want. And our Danish partner said, well, we came to the point that people just want to have it. So I know in policies there's a lot of focus on return on investment, so the idea investing in better energy performance in your dwelling will reduce your energy bill. I have to disappoint you. It is, in reality, it is not working quite well. What is happening is that people cut their comfort in a non-performing dwelling.
Absolutely.
They just start to live in their kitchen and put their TV there and a sofa there, and they don't heat up the rest of their dwelling. In theory, the energy consumption of the house should be high, but in practice, it's low. Once it's insulated, people use their entire house, and they accept an energy bill. So that's very bad news for reducing carbon emissions from the residential sector. But for people seeking for comfort, it's very important to emphasize the comfort issue there, because it's very convincing. People just can leave the doors open, and that's something that's so important that people want to have the cost efficient. They're looking for the most cost efficient way to do it, instead of making a calculation of how much would it cost me extra energy investment, and I have a return on investment of 20 years. People do not bother about that. They just want to have a comfortable house on a most cost efficient way, and that's it.
Thank you very much. I think we'll move now to the panel discussion. I'd like to introduce two people who I haven't introduced and are joining the panel now. One is Professor Wolfgang Keimer, who you may know is head of the Competence Center for Energy Policy and Energy Markets at the Fraunhofer Institute for Systems and Innovation Research. And the second one is not Giorgia Caroli, as expected. She had, for personal matters, she couldn't make it today, but she asked Stefano Casiraghi to replace her. He's from Altro Consumo in Italy and representing Consumer Association. And I'd like to open the discussion now, the last 30 minutes, with one question related to your experience. And I know the two additional speakers have experience as well in this field. In your experience, what is the main barrier in engaging consumer, and how did you overcome it? Perhaps you want to start over there?
Okay. Yes, I'm Stefano Casiraghi, so I'm from Italian consumer organization Altro Consumo. I'm a project manager for some H 2020 project as a Clear 2 now running, and I'm a consumer energy expert. As I said, I'm replacing here Giorgia, who is from Testachat Consumer Belgian Association, so I try to highlight you some our idea that we share and we agree, and we have also some bullet points, so I try to, in fair way, to replace her. So about the barriers, what we can say in our experience, so in our very traditional works today in touch with consumers, but also with our European project experience, we say that for sure about the green energy, the barriers could be the upfront cost. And the second one that we have investigated and by some analysis that we have done are for sure the rules, regulation that sometimes they change and they create some unexpected scenario for consumers, and also the maintenance and some information that they absolutely needs in order to be engaged and to be able to be completely active consumers or became prosumers with the renewable energy technologies in order to well manage all the new systems that are going to install at home. So this is our experience. The main barrier that all the stakeholders should be absolutely aware in order to try to decrease there and to keep going in this new paradigm where consumers are becoming day by day more active in the energy market.
So, Stefano, since you have the floor, I think you mentioned the barrier of initial cost. I mean, can you just say a word about group purchasing? It's something we haven't discussed about, and I know that Testasha at least has been involved in a project developing this kind of solution.
Absolutely. The group purchase is one of the most important pillars that we have explored in the past, but we are still running in the consortium of Clear and now Clear 2. We saw for some domestic system appliances, we have organized some group purchase trying to engage a lot of consumers. We're giving you some highlights about the figures in all the 4 organizations that are used to do this kind of project. We have gathered in the different group purchase close to 1 million consumers, and we have installed some like for sure than 100,000 system spread off in Spain, Portugal, Italy, Belgium, and also in the past Holland, and now in this running project in Slovenia and Czech Republic. And what is really important is group purchase, by our experience, is to reduce the upfront cost. So try to negotiate with important players of the market the pricing, but at the same time, as said before, it's also the legal condition. So by our experience, we have tried, for example, for the photovoltaic domain, try to develop a very easy, very clear, and very consumer-centric contract in order to give a very clear situation to the consumers that absolute need to put money in the front at the beginning, but also need to manage the system during whole the life. So you should be informed about the guarantee, the warranty, and also about all the cost of the maintenance, the system and the products.
That's a very interesting solution, because not only do you organize these group purchase, but you also test the products that eventually the people will buy. So there's a seal of excellence, I would say, when people go into that process.
Yes,
I'm turning to...
I can confirm, sorry, that Vincent, you are absolutely informed. Yeah. It's something I forgot. We test all the solution in order to give also quality. This is another important pillar of the group purchase, because people are informed that our product tested by independent organizations, so they can trust.
Yep. No. And turning to you, Wolfgang, because you know about the barriers and solutions, and you've explored all that from a scientific point of view in certain projects in Horizon 2020. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So my name is Wolfgang Eichhammer. My name is Wolfgang Eichhammer. I'm working with Fraunhofer ISI in Karlsruhe, Germany. And the projects which we're working upon were Horizon 2020 projects, in particular the Brisky and Cheetah projects. And the essential topics of these two projects were decision-making of households, to understand, on one hand, how people choose energy-efficient technology, for example, refrigerators, heating devices, smart thermostats on one hand, and on the other hand, how they react to policy design. And the policy design was in particular a topic of the Cheetah project, and roughly speaking, we have been looking at 18,000 households in 8 different European countries. And you see also differences between countries. You see natural differences between income, between believer groups, let's say, and so on. So you see a lot of these influences here. On the other hand, you also see the role of intermediaries, which is very important. For example, whether subsidies are provided by energy providers or by governments. For example, for heating system, we saw clearly differences, and people seem to accept more easily when subsidies are provided by energy providers for heating systems. So this, I would say, more scientific way of testing policies is also something which can be interesting in the policy sphere. In particular, for example, when there are questions around how about energy poor households, distributional effects. We all know about the French yellow jackets and the question if this very good measure about tax increase on transport fuels, if that would have been a little bit differently designed with less distributional effects, maybe Macron would have been easier off, I don't know. But so this is also an interesting tool, let's say, to explore that. So I would say this gives also indications of the role of information. And we saw here very beautiful tools presented earlier, like the PEAKapp tool and the Resco Plus tool and others. And I think these are also very important helps that provide possibilities that didn't exist 10 years ago. Also, we still have to be aware when looking at the broadness of the population, we have still a kind of digital divide. I mean, I'm particularly thinking about my mother-in-law of 80 years who doesn't use apps and Slido and so on. So the question is, we simply leave these people out and let them die at some point in time, but maybe it takes a bit too long time. So we also have to be aware that our tools address mostly younger populations, which is on one hand good because they are the drivers of the future, but we still have to live with elderly people like me also for some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolfgang. And thank you for mentioning Cheetah and Brisky. They are very important projects on the research side, socioeconomic research. And I know that these projects have provided feedback for the policy-making activities, especially in the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive. I see Serena Pontolio sitting over there from DGN, and she's nodding. Of course, that's valuable inputs, of course, for that. Turning now to Jade, maybe, and the main barrier that you encountered in your competition, your activities.
I think for us, potentially it would be kind of accessible choices. So I think the energy market can be really difficult to kind of understand and navigate, and that is particularly more the case if you're a vulnerable consumer. So you might be vulnerable through your age, through your experience, through your low income as well. So we find lots of students that want to engage on the issue, but they just can't kind of navigate the system very well. And we find that the system can also be quite prohibitive through other mechanisms like cost. So, for example, students find it very difficult to install energy efficient measures in their own homes when they're only staying there for a very short amount of time, or they're not sort of having very good relationships with their landlords. Cost as well is that we know students want to do the right thing, but that can also be difficult. So green tariffs, for example, there's a demand out there, but it's prohibitive for students via the cost of that. And I think all these kind of added barriers and elements in the way all kind of equate to a very disengaged consumer. And students put up with a lot. They go into their houses for a short period of time and they put up with very expensive energy bills and they put up with really poor quality housing and they don't really know what to do about that or how to go about it. So for us, I think making sure that we understand the challenges that our audience are facing and just make sure that we tailor everything to that. So we make sure that we're trusted, we've got really like specific information and very tailored to the things that we know that students are going to want to know about and need to know about, so we're not bombarding them with lots of information. And just, I think, to make sure that they do feel like they have some element of control within the whole system. So, for example, when they're out house hunting, we will let them know that they can look at their potential household and their EPC to see what the energy performance is, so they can make some really good and informed decisions on which housing they want to do and the impact of taking on an inefficient home compared to an efficient home of their finances as well.
On that side of the table, I don't know if Antoine, you want to say something?
Yes, as I said, in private condominiums, because the process of decision is very complex and can stop very easily, I'd say the main barrier is not necessarily to get into the co-ownership, it's to get the co-ownership to finally decide. I said that the market average was 5% of co-ownership coming to a decision when they have benefited from an energy study. So that was really low. And the question is how not to lose them. The solution we have found is to provide them with information in a format that they can understand, which very basically comes down to it's search for a month when everything has been taken into order, every public subsidy and loan and such. And
on that one, do you think there's scope for changing the rules on how decisions are taken in multi-family dwellings?
There's definitely scope for changing the rules because it's a bit antiquated and it's very difficult to reach conclusions. However, we're talking about, I don't want to just say that it's you're going to solve that if you can silence basically a part of the people that will not vote or vote against that. The truth is you have about 25% of the people that have very high difficulties to pay for the renovation. So even if you make rules easier to decide, if you don't really manage a consensus inside the co-ownership, you're going to have a no. We usually have scores between 80% and 70%, which is very important for voting, or it doesn't pass. We don't have like 51 or 52.
Yeah. Okay. Dominique?
Well, I already explained that the renovation process is very complex, and it is combined with very often people of homeowners want to reduce even the costs or the complexity, or try to avoid an architect because that brings extra costs and extra obligations. But that creates a new problem because then the amateurism of the process becomes even higher, and even the assurance of the quality that has been executed is becoming more risky. And in the field of, in this renovation process, there are a lot of professionals that want to earn some money with you, and there is a lot of lack of trust or confidence. People do not feel confident in their renovation process. So a main thing to try to tackle is having somebody there that they can trust. And what we experimented with in the project and works quite good is a renovation coach. Is focusing on the partial renovations, so the staged renovations, so the renovations that are not carried out by an architect or guided by an architect. And he has a good technical expertise, has a very good social skills. He knows how the decision-making process of people is going. I think that one you can confirm. Some people just decide to do the same as their neighbor because they think their neighbor is smart. You can't convince them with a lot of figures because they get confused. So you need to know how everybody is to convince, and every process and every person is different. So we really need to work tailor-made. So this renovation coach can do it. And very important, he is independent. So he is even paid. People pay for that service. So they want to pay for it because then they know, okay, I'm not fooled with it. So yeah, I think confidence and trust in the renovation process, make it more professional. That's a real challenge, and we are experimenting with models that really can help there.
Johannes or Stanislas? Well, so as we didn't actually work on refurbishments, maybe I have to refocus a bit on like the smaller things that happen in a house, like the decisions whether to buy an efficient equipment as the next one, or even the very immediate decisions like whether to switch on your washing machine exactly now or program it to be started in 3 hours. And at least for these kind of behavioral measures, we can say that the very decisive factor is feedback. People need a very, very immediate feedback on what their actions will actually have for their own, but also on a more societal level, like for the energy, the climate, and things like this. And I think it is a very important thing we need to tackle to provide people access to this kind of very immediate feedback, as we know that if you want to train a dog to repeat the behavior, you have about 2 seconds to provide him feedback. We are a bit more patient with humans, so it's not that dramatic, but after about 1 day, he will not be able to connect his activity to like the feedback that you provide him. So whenever we build up kind of energy efficiency enhancing structures, I believe we need to work on that a lot, and the monthly billing and things that are coming now may not be enough necessarily.
Right. From our side, we work with a population that was already very engaged. So in that sense, we didn't have a lot of barriers. So maybe I'm biased, and I'm very lucky to work with people that are already convinced. However, I think most of the points were already mentioned. Trust is extremely important, and that's coming from a governance structure that is shared, where we actually all participate, and we all also give some time and some effort into bringing that change forward. And I think then people understand simply because they participate. That process takes a lot of time, and I think a lot of effort. One of the things that we encountered with private companies that have similar tools as the ones that you saw today, there's nothing revolutionary about what we're bringing to our members. The difference is that we actually spend the time and spend the effort, and they actually can trust us simply because we work for them and not for anybody else. So in that sense, it makes our lives a lot easier. When we started explaining that in Turkey, that you can actually get together and have somebody that is working for you to help you save energy, people had stars in their eyes and suddenly realized, okay, suddenly I don't get screwed by my plumber. Oh, that's fantastic. Wow. I actually understand what energy means. I can understand what is the best solution. I want to spend time with my neighbors. It's not a condominium meeting where I have to spend 2 hours in a basement and it's a nightmare and we have to sign that contract absolutely because it's already 1 in the morning. It's also this aspect of community. And I think in terms of what we realize as a barrier, the barrier is that if you don't have a sense of community, then that work takes a lot of time. And so that's the main barrier for us.
Thank you very much, Stanislas. Before asking you the last question, I'd like to turn the room again and see whether there are any burning questions from the audience. Turning to Sylvia as well to see if it's loud. There's one there over there. Yeah, if you could introduce yourself and your question then. Thank you.
Okay, Mark Buchens. I'm not representing anybody except me. So, consumer, like everybody here. Just once more on the collaborative side, because what I hear is quite a lot of push, even if in the interest of the people. But once more, how can we expand this, and I heard a lot of interesting things about how the consumer, happy about the solution, can also send the solution or come with new ideas in the process. And I've not listened a lot about that, a little bit, and saying, yes, when a neighbor say it's good, the other neighbor want to do it. But it can be for the student. You can send a student in a social housing and have the contact and explain, and young people are perhaps more seductive or at least convincing that political people or people from abroad. So everything is about the trust. And I read a very good books about new, I say it in French because the book I'm listening, it's a Nouveau Contre-Pouvoir, where they explain that they make, for example, a test where they push the people in United States to vote through Facebook, and they said, yeah, you should vote because very good reason. Another group without anything, and the last group was when the people said, I want to vote, yes, you convince me, they send the information to 5 of their friends. And the best polls, there was in the France, you know, where the last group was where the people said, I will vote, and the people there, 75% of the people has vote in the election. The 2 other groups, there were no difference. So if you try to convince somebody with good argument to vote, they don't go to vote more than another guy. But if somebody say, I'm going to vote, and it's somebody you trust, it's working well. So it's just an example of this book, but I think it's really another way of convincing people out of slogan and out of top-down way of singing. And I've not listened a lot about that in all what you said. I find this action very interesting and very nice. It's not the same. But how can we make it contagious, you know, it's going from 1,000 people or 100,000 people to millions of people, I see.
No, that's a very relevant question.
I don't know if my question is clear or not.
Yeah, it's about replication.
About replication, about the people acting themselves in the process.
How to encourage others to follow suit, and whether social media can help. I don't know if any of you wants to answer.
But for me, it's more than media. It's really acting, coming with the solution and pushing others.
Yeah, so perhaps Stanislas. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for this question. That's actually a key issue that we're facing at the moment. How do you replicate to communities that do not know about community energy and how to get together more closely? So there are several mechanisms that are put in place in the movement. If you look in France, they chose a mechanism that was based on regional animators, so people that are actually from the cooperative movement in the region, available to be contacted, and that are not paid by any private companies, but simply here to help you drive your renewable project forward, whatever it may be. So it can be also electrical mobility, it can be energy efficiency. So in that sense, putting a third party that is trustable and that is actually helping per region. So that's the French model. The Belgians decided to go through municipalities, and that's the Licht project, if you want to take a look at it in Leuven, where the cooperative EcoPower, with the support of the Leuven municipality, is sending an animator in different villages. So basically, funnily enough, it's a little truck that looks very weird that parks into your village and that stays there until somebody comes and asks questions. And then once you have the first question, then you can have a discussion with a group of people. And once you have the group of people, then suddenly you have the neighborhood and you can start having a collective discussion on what can we do collectively. In the Netherlands, they chose something a little bit different. They go from more the project approach. So they took a look at, I think one of the big issues right now in the Netherlands is how do you transfer away from gas? I think a lot of Dutch citizens are aware of that. And so they simply come with a clear solution saying that if you collectively organize as an area, you and your neighbors, then we'll provide you with the technical solution and the support from the government. So giving you an incentive to act collectively. That's the tools that we have in the movement at the moment. There is also others, of course, in Croatia, for example, where students are actually going into low-income households and supporting them to work in order to get this professional education. In Greece, where currently we have associations that are supporting the development of community energy as well. There is a broad range of things going on, but it depends on what you want with your neighbors and your community, I guess.
Jade, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, so I think it was touched on about how social media can kind of help the collaborative element, and I think that's really important. So we do a lot of our competitions on social media, and in the past we've very much focused on show us a picture of yourself doing an energy saving action, so you have that kind of peer-to-peer spread and normalization of these actions. But more and more we're trying to have different framing on that. So for example, we might have a competition which is, what do you do in your own home to save energy? And we've had students from all different universities then kind of posting their messages on, this is what we do, and sort of sharing that across the country. So I think that's a really nice way that students are kind of shaping the actions that actually are useful to themselves. And also just through like the ambassador element as well. So having volunteers that are actually well placed within your communities, I think, are really important. So for us, we kind of do an initial training with our ambassadors, but then we get them to kind of go out and run their own activities as well. So we have a lot of our student volunteers who will kind of have the seed of inspiration planted with them through the campaign, but then we'll go and we'll see that they've ran their own events. They'll have drinks and quizzes and a whole host of different things that they know that will appeal to students within their kind of social group and get them motivated.
Thank you. Sylvia, oh, there's one question over there.
Yeah,
and then we move to slide, no, one question here, and then we move to Slido, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Artemy Voroshilov with Smart Energy Water. First off, awesome contributions and very meaningful and impactful stuff. So as a taxpayer, I'm happy. No, serious. I'm happy that money is well invested. But if I may, I'd like to single out Jonas and your project, because to me, and it's been proven in multiple publications, there's a disconnect between each of us and every of us trying to save the planet and actually not having that feedback mechanism and tooling around that to just do something, right? So my kids may, participate in all those, but they just don't know how to turn the shower off, after so many minutes. So, question is how very available, very, technology available off the shelf that brings this loop mechanism, how is that technology not being applied everywhere, anywhere, in any of your projects? Because what you just mentioned, social interaction, gamification, it's not just buzzwords, it's just available and off the shelf, right? How is that not yet incorporated at scale to what all of you are trying to do?
Jonas, maybe you want to react.
Yeah.
The PEAKapp, typically, why is it not used more widely?
Yeah, first of all, I did not have the time to talk about that, but we actually had a gamification in the PEAKapp, so people were asked to bet on their next day's energy consumption, and if they were good, then they had, or bad, then they could balance their estimated energy consumption to their real energy consumption by refrigerating a six-pack of beer or some stupid things to bring some fun to them. And actually, it has turned out that this one was one of the least used functionalities that we had in our project. So people were more interested in this hard fact stuff, like what's my consumption, what can I save, what can I earn. These gameful things did not really take off. We also had the possibility to let them post their energy consumption or their achievements in the game on Facebook or on Twitter, and I think over the whole 18 months we got about 20 posts. So that's not really what our community at least was too interested in. Maybe we didn't push it enough, I don't know, but it did not take off by itself. But I know, of course, from other projects that there are very useful approaches on that. And I think one of the real barriers that still are there, why all these kind of app stuff and small business models are not applied more broadly, is that access to smart meter data still basically requires that you have a retailer or a DSO that is driving it. For a third party, it's very, very hard to get access to that data in most of our countries, or the effort to connect an additional consumer's load profiles to your system is too high to be used in smaller business models that would earn you maybe 5 or 10 euros per additional household. So I think one of the real challenges that we have, and that I hope will be resolved by the electricity directive, is to make the smart meter data really a resource, an easily accessible, low-cost resource for these kind of developments, provided through third parties and not again through utilities.
Thank you. Silvia, on the slide.
There was questions still related to the involvement, engagement of consumers. So by looking at their needs and barrier is a question transversal to all projects. Have you involved specialists in social marketing in your different projects that having the competencies somehow to also engage?
I try to summarize a little bit the three last questions coming from our experience. So gamification, yes, we have tried to do. We have tried to develop a tool in order to aware consumer about green technology at home via with the gamification approach, but obviously it was just the first way. I think that we are now more aware that it's absolutely a good road to use in order to be efficient and have an impact. The same about the previous question about the approach not from top to down. Yes, we agree. For the same reason, we have decided also to enlarge and put more effort in our social community. It's not a revolutionary approach, but we are strongly convinced that it's important to try to encourage a consumer and share all the experience from the bottom. So it's very important that my neighborhood or just a friends on the community say, okay, I have this is experience. It's not something that is said just by the manufacturer association. It's not something coming from Brussels. It's something that I have done. It's good. It works. I am really appreciate also for my home and my life. And the last question was about, sorry.
Social scientists?
Yes, we have social scientists that try to push on the social media our project, yes.
Actually, the involvement of social scientists and relying on social science and humanities is very important in this project, and that's what we promote all the time to our applicants before they apply for funding. I don't know if any of you in the other projects, in Leidal maybe?
Yes, in our project we had a Dutch partner available there, and we were lucky that the person working on the project there had a background in marketing, and that was very useful because that was a guy coming up with the customer journey concept. And there were a lot of engineers in the project, but he somehow delivered the framework that all these problems we encountered, that we could place them, and he proved, he gave us the right concept. So indeed, it brings very much added value to have social marketeers there, and that's the way we need to we need to involve them even more, really to understand from a perspective of a homeowner, to really convince them that's the way to go.
Yes, very short. We had someone help us made a mind map of the co-ownerships as a social compact, and with interviews and that sort of thing. It doesn't bring answers, but it brings a lot of questions which you could have missed.
Okay, we've come to the end of that session, 12:30. I would just like to wrap up. I mean, for me, it was very interesting to hear about concrete solutions. I mean, we heard a lot about involving consumers. That was yesterday. Now, today, we hear about real solutions that are available, that have been developed thanks to EU funding, that are now at the disposal of everyone who wants to replicate. I mean, that's the message, really, that we want to pass. Please get inspired. I think what we heard is that with proper solutions, consumers can be engaged. The solutions need to be easy. They need to have, consumers need to have access to tools and services that they trust. I mean, many of you mentioned the element of trust, which is very important. In that respect, one-stop shops, energy information services, purchase groups, community actions can have a very important role to play. Immediate feedback is very important, mentioned also by several of you. We need to have more easily access to information on independent advice on energy efficiency. ICT solutions were mentioned by several as an opportunity to further empower consumers. We talk about also the importance of not just talking about the energy savings, but also other aspects like comfort, so multiple benefits of energy efficiency, which is worth highlighting. And on the methodologies themselves and on the pitching sessions, my takeaway is that we need to have a clearly defined target groups when we engage with consumers. Very important to involve the right stakeholders. I mean, social scientists were mentioned at the end of that session, but there are many other disciplines that we need to rely on when we develop this kind of solutions. If you want more information about all these projects and the many more that we've supported, like I said in my introduction, more than 100 projects that we've supported address consumers, please go on our website, EASME website, or all the information is also available on the Horizon 2020 website. And if you're interested in developing new solutions and you've come up with new ideas listening to all the presentation this morning, then please be aware that funding is available in Horizon 2020. We've got a call for proposals that is open now, closing in September, where we will call for new projects addressing collective actions, energy poverty, one-stop shops for buildings, buildings renovation, there's also a specific call for that type of actions. So there is support, you can access it. There will be support next year as well, in 2020. The call will be published very soon in the coming weeks. Next week, if you're interested here in Brussels, starting on Tuesday, we'll have a big info day where we'll present all the priorities for funding for next year, including the priorities on consumers. So please come if you're interested. Could be followed online as well, so you can stay home and watch us on the internet. And with this, I'd like to conclude this session. I'd like to thank very much the speakers for being brief and to the point. I mean, that's something which I appreciated. And I'd like to thank also Silvia Vivarelli over there, who has been organizing the whole session and briefing our speakers today. Thank you very much and have a good day. Thanks.